All right, you're good to go.
Great, terrific. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to one of our, I think we have maybe 2 subcommittee bonding meetings, 3, including today. Welcome you all today. We have a very robust agenda of our agencies, and I'm excited. I think these committee meetings have been going so well. We're all together learning so much about the need of our agencies, what the financial position and status is of today, and what they need going forward, and so that we could better help the residents across Connecticut. So before we kick off, I want to turn it over to my co-chair, Senator Moore, to see if you have any welcoming remarks.
I'd just like to welcome our new ranking, Senator Wong. And as you said, this has been very productive. So I look forward to another productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Representative Piscopo?
Yes, good afternoon all. I hope you all got out for a quick spring walk. It's a beautiful day out there. Spring fever's hit. And I would also like to welcome Senator Wong, who used to be a representative down there in the House with us. But welcome to the bonding subcommittee.
Great, thank you, Representative. And Senator Wong, I know you used to be a representative. See how much we're learning in these meetings?
Yes, you know what they say, once a House member, always a House member. So very fondly remember my experience there. I'm so excited to join on this committee, and there's so much to learn and engage from a bonding initiative. I want to thank Senator Moore for her tenure, and I'm looking forward to learning from everybody and doing my best to contribute. It's a great committee, and looking forward to working with everybody. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Awesome. And I have no doubt you will get up to speed very quickly with the amazing team that we have supporting us on this call and throughout the week. So I think, Tom, we have our Capital Regional Development Authority here with us.
Correct, they are here. Yep, they're ready.
Okay, and I think I see my old friend Mike Freeman in the queue. Mike, are you presenting or?
Yes, I am the presenter. How have you been?
Good. How are you?
Okay. I got my senator here too. I got to be careful now, Mr. Huang. So, sure. Whenever.
The floor is yours. You could just take it away. We already have your documents. What we've been doing is the agencies, as you know, send us the documents ahead of time so that we could digest them and then, ask any follow-up questions after you provide your introduction.
Sure. I'll give it just a quick background. For those new members, as well as those who might have been grinding through this for a few years, CRDA is a successor agency to an earlier version, which was known as the Capital City Economic Development Authority, which was the entity that built the convention center in Adrian's Landing during the years following the initial Patriots deal and casino deals and things of that nature. Over the years, it morphed into CRDA in 2012. The statute was changed to focus more directly on the city's downtown core. We have evolved from that point 8 years ago. There are 5 main areas we concentrate on. First and foremost is we're responsible for the convention center, Rentzler Field, the XL Center, the Front Street District, and some 16,000 parking spaces. Those are our day-to-day management of the capital assets of the state. They need various amounts of capital improvements, the XL being the biggest leader of that. But even the convention center and Rentzler Field now are 15 to 20 years old, and they're starting to show their age. And over the last few years, we've begun some work on them. We're also entrusted with the development with the legislative goal of some 3,000 units of housing. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Is that?
I'm sure. Hey, Tom, do you see anybody unmuted?
Yeah, let me look right now.
I think it's Senator Martin.
I can't remember. Yeah, I'll mute him.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That.
That's okay. I was just hearing an echo. We were instructed by statute to pursue some 3,000 units of housing in the downtown core. To date, we've built about 2,000 of those units. We have regional obligations where we're investing in East Hartford. We've also done projects in Wethersfield and Newington, and then having conversations with a few other towns in the greater region. We're also responsible for some state properties. The regional agricultural market that's in the South Meadows, for instance, falls under the CRDA heading. So we have also undertaken office conversion projects on behalf of the state DAS, most notably the Columbus Boulevard properties a few years ago. And finally, we do neighborhood projects. Legislation was expanded some years ago to get us more involved with neighborhood projects within the city of Hartford per se. And lately, we've been working on several economic development initiatives, several of them in the Albany Avenue corridor and the North End, but there's also several projects in Parkville and the Coltville area that we've been engaged with. So we're diverse, we're active in many fronts. Our primary purpose is protecting the large state assets that are the venues, including the garages, but we do a lot of underwriting of housing development, neighborhood development projects. At the moment, we have about 20 projects in construction. We have about 20 to 25 of them in the pipeline, which would go to the question of how to use the authority that's outstanding and hasn't been allocated. And the largest single project, of course, is the XL Center, which has been up and down, in and out, a variety of different ways over the last few years, not only in this committee, but in the overall General Assembly, as well as in discussions with our board and the undergoing downtown development teams. So that's a quick background on us. I know you have a spreadsheet of 4 or 5 pages of CRDA projects and programs. I'd be happy to talk about any of those and answer whatever questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mike. I'm looking to see if I don't see any hands yet, so I will just ask if you can. You mentioned some of the funding that has been authorized but unallocated, and wondering if you could provide just what your thoughts are around. So, for example, the XL, there's 65 million that was authorized unallocated. The development is 66 million that's been unallocated. What discussions have you had about allocating those funds?
Well, we'll back up. The XL Center, we were asked to reprogram our initial plan. We had looked initially at a much larger scale project. That was rejected, both at the gubernatorial level as well as the legislative level. That was a $250 million program. We've gone back to reboot it to 100 million. The original 40 was allocated and put into our bank book. We've been drawing down on that. The remaining 65 was allocated in the last biennial, spread across 2 years. To date, the Bond Commission hasn't given us a green light to go to the full project. And so we're somewhat at that discussion point with the governor's office and OPM to release those funds. We've been doing a lot of small projects, kind of things that have been deferred. The building's 45 years old. Everything from elevators, escalators, to light switches, to HVAC systems have all sort of been taxed out. So we've been doing a lot of repair work, holding the place together, doing what upgrades we could. And most noticeably, rebuilt the ice equipment, basically the floor, as well as the systems behind all that. The remaining 65 is a call whether we're going to go full bore or not and rebuild the building. We know that the building is slowly, quietly losing its business niche, in large part because it can't generate the revenues events now want, in large part because it was designed in the 70s as a classic, sit 16 seats in and have a hot dog passed down. Whereas today, these things are big social engineering centers where a lot of activity goes on. It demands a lot of upgrades, but also demands a lot of revenue streams, produces a lot of leverage. So we're waiting on XL. We've advanced it quite a ways with purchasing the property next door, which is critical for the concourse. We're dealing with security issues that no one foresaw in the 70s. We're dealing now with COVID security issues. But we're also trying to build the program in a way that allows UConn to use it in a better way and share better revenue. So all that is in conversation. The designs are pretty much done. They're pretty far advanced. We haven't gone to full construction for the very reason that we haven't gotten through the Bond Commission. On the housing front, there is about 66 million, I believe, in unallocated funds that have been authorized. We have projects in the housing/neighborhood development side right now that total north of 85 million. That 85 million would in itself generate north of 400 to 425 million in investment. We generally leverage our funds. We're generally 18 to 20% of a deal. That in large part represents the gap between what it costs to build in this town and what they're worth at the end of the day. So that gap is one that we finance because the conventional markets and the equity markets won't. And so we're looking at probably north of 80, 85 million in programs that I know of today that needs to get a date on the calendar. Of those, there is at the moment somewhere around 30 million that could be bonded tomorrow if we were given the green light and go forward. The largest being on Bushnell South, which is the first step in creating a housing enclave just south of Bushnell Park. So those are where we're at with those two large initiatives. You know, a lot of questions and answers that come along in all those projects, but that's the way they lay out.
Got it. Great. Thanks. And I had some follow-up questions about East Hartford's economic development, but I'm going to turn it over to Representative Piscopo for his questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mike. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
I remember when you were here at the beginning of the last biennium, housing in Hartford was just booming, and it was good to see. Actually, you couldn't build housing fast enough for the people moving in. And you mentioned that the goal is 7,000 more units. You have 2,000 already built. We've all seen a kind of a unfortunate decline in housing in Hartford. Are you nimble enough to move on that? I know you just said that 30 million could go in the pipeline tomorrow. Is that a done deal? Is that a contract?
No.
Can you catch me up on? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Our statutory goal is 3,000 units, not 7.
Okay.
Of which we've done about 2. Initially, we were restricted to the downtown core. That's essentially, in your mind's eye, that would be with 8491 interchange, follow it down to the Colt building, then diagonally back to Etna. If you basically look at that triangular area, that's the downtown core, and that's where our district is legislatively drawn. There's some bumps in that line, but that's essentially the area. We have built out about 2,000 units in that area. It probably needs, and really to get the flywheel spinning with retail and discretionary spending achievement, probably needs to be pushed closer to 5,000 units downtown to have a working neighborhood that would drive grocery stores and local coffee shops and things of that nature year round. So it's still shy of where we think it needs to be for a walkable community, but it's about 2/3 of the way towards the statutory goal of 3,000. Of those units, the ones that are occupied, leasing, active, we built over the last few years, most of them are occupied around 90% right now, which is a very good rate for residential apartment buildings. There's a normal churn where you turn over your units, but the rents have held relatively steady. We saw a little dip in both occupancy and in rents last year during COVID, in part because the replacement cycle was not working and the folks were still leaving. So we had lost that, if you will, the opportunity to refill the buildings. We've caught up on most buildings since then, and we have quite a few units that are in the pipeline. We actually held back the reins a little bit in only releasing so many projects last year, frankly, because we were a little unwary. We were wary. We weren't unwary of where the market was going and what it could absorb, and basically eating our own young by undermining buildings that we're trying to operate that we'd already invested in. As we sit here today, there's 2 buildings of some scale being built. Park in Maine is under construction, and Downtown North is under construction. There are some 350 plus units that'll come online in those 2 buildings sometime between now and the end of 22. We think we can inhale those pretty easily. There's also some neighborhood projects that are leasing up very quickly. So I think we have a bit of an understanding of the demand. The price point hasn't increased to really make it work on a conventional model yet, though. The rents are still in the $2 to $2.50 a square foot per month range for residential. To compare it, in New Haven, it's north of 3. In Stamford, it's north of 4. To really make it work, you got to get in the $3 to $4 range in rent to make it work to the private market. Being that we're still running around the low 2s, we still need to get in there and kind of structure some debt and equity instruments to close those holes. Those rents haven't gone up much. They seem to be hovering in that. They are appreciably up from where they were 3-4 years ago, but they're still not at a market point. But as far as what we built and what's in the pipeline, to short stroke on your question is yes, I think we can handle the current pipeline and still see success in the units we have on the street.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Representative Piscopo. Senator Moore.
Thank you, and welcome, Mike.
How you been?
I've heard a lot about some of the things that have gone on in this on these properties, and I think you gave a good explanation of how this works up in Hartford. I've heard it over and over again. It's a capital redevelopment. I've also mostly heard it on the floor about spending money on the XL Center. How much money do we want to put into this? And heard a variety of comments. So it's nice to hear it directly from you. On the XL Center, have we ever thought about, or is there an opportunity to do a public partnership, private partnership on the XL Center? Has that conversation taken place?
Yes, actually, we've done 2 solicitations for public-private partnership. Neither one produced anything that would help us make the project go. One proposal came in, basically wanted us to advance debt to them and guarantee them a return. Under that scenario, we could have floated the debt at a much more advantageous price for ourselves than to have borrowed privately. So that didn't go anywhere. The second time, we got no responses. The fundamental problem is the XL Center runs at about depending on the year, runs between $1 million and $2 million in the red. And requires, as we sit here today, we think an estimated $100 million investment to bring it up to industry standards. For the private sector to come in, they need a return not only on that $100 million or whatever portion they fund, but they also know and they also want an operational return that shows a positive cash flow. Part of the issue is the way we have structured the XL over the years. The XL kicks out about $2 million in taxes. All those go to the general fund. They don't go to the XL Center per se. So those are monies that find their way to basically OPM in its budget process, and comes backdoor to us in the building to underwrite the operational deficit. Many buildings get their taxes that they generate from their activity driven back to them to help underwrite them. So that's a fundamental structural issue we have. Secondly, we draw about $1.2 million off of parking garages to underwrite the operation of the XL Center. But in years like this, we can't do it because the parking garages revenues are so low because of the activity level downtown have dropped so dramatically. So there's no certainty to those numbers, but projected year to year, we do grab about $1 million to underwrite XL from parking facilities that we control. So the structural nature of XL is you got to look at all its different revenue streams, but an investor's looking at the building exclusively, and the building runs basically isolated to its own budget, a red budget. So that's tough to bring in private investment. We have not had any success. We were kind of thinking we could get some private money in there, but the cost of funds was such that we could probably do it better ourselves, looking at how the state floats GO bonds. At this point, a revenue bond structure, which is perhaps slightly more expensive than a GO bond, would be a smart way of going with this property, because we believe the revenues will go up in the property as we upgrade it. Right now, we're leaving a lot of money on the table, so to speak. We're not getting the same kind of concessions, food and beverages, suites, luxury sales that we could get because we just don't have that product. So there's some revenue being left on the table that the private guys want to build. But our anxiety, frankly, is the building needs so much more than new revenue lines. It needs new elevators and some fundamentals that don't return on investment to the private side.
So this almost sounds like uh, a bad investment. I'll just say that. I don't know another way of getting around that. We keep putting money into this and there's nothing coming out of it. And
Well,
I imagine that you're even losing during COVID-19. There had to be a huge loss with nothing going on in the past year.
well, COVID-19 was horrific for us. We lost quite a bit of money, in part because there was zero revenues. Just generally speaking, we get somewhere between 18 to 20 million in revenues. The building runs somewhere around 21, 22 in costs. But you can't omit a couple other things. It does push, on an active day, there's 700 people working in that building. On a normal round the clock, it employs about 50. But the real push on that is it pushes activity into the hotels, into the restaurants, into the bars, into the parking garages. It produces taxes to the state greater than what the state puts in a subsidy. Like I said, the taxes run about $2 million net to the state. The state puts about $600,000 a year in its operating budget to keep the building running. It pushes a lot of activity downtown. Frankly, some of these restaurants and bars that service the commercial market during the day survive in the evening and weekends with the XL Center. In part, that goes to the question that was raised a little while ago, is how do you get more discretionary income moving around town to keep everybody happy? And that comes from building a residential base. But the XL Center spins out a lot of positive activity that it doesn't get credit for. It's a loss leader the same way Macy's attracts you to the mall and pays a low rent. The XL Center attracts you to the downtown community, and from there, it generates activity that gets measured in other ways, either in the restaurant or the hotel or parking garage, or for that matter, tax office over on Capitol Avenue. So,
How many
yeah, look at it
employees?
bigger. Go ahead.
How many employees?
Well, I think on a 24-hour full-time basis, and Joe Jeremiah is here, he can correct me, I believe it's around 50 full-time, but then on an event night, it gets as high as 600. And that's everything from security to concessions to cleaning to other things that go on, the day-to-day bump and grind of the property.
Where do those employees come from when there's not an event? I mean, are those
Most
gig
of
jobs?
our part-time. Yeah, most of it's part-time, depending on the show. They might work in multiple buildings. We might move them around. They might be at Rentzler Field for an event there on a Saturday and at the XL on a Tuesday night. So their hours will get spread across the event load in different buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a workforce that gets pretty much moved about where the events demand it. And it varies based on the nature of the event.
And then was there any COVID funds available to you?
We did receive some COVID funds initially to do some cleaning and to do some upgrades that were necessary by COVID. For instance, the special screening devices and things of that nature. Nothing operational because COVID can't make up for lost revenues. It can handle expenses brought to the building.
Do you see anything in the rescue plan that might be available to you?
Not for the XL Center, no. We think there's something in the American Rescue Package that could possibly help the two hotels. The Hilton Hotel is attached to the XL, sits on public land. The Marriott Hotel sits at the Adrian's Landing, attached to the Convention Center. Again, sitting on public land. It was underwritten by the state initially. We're hopeful that the American Recovery Act can identify some funds to help those two buildings get through the current cash strain.
So these properties sit on state property, but they're private, the buildings and the businesses are privately owned?
In the case of the Hilton, they sit on a city-owned parcel that was developed in the 60s as part of an urban renewal, and it is privately owned. The building is basically an air rights. In the case of the Marriott, it sits on state-owned land, which is the Adrian's Landing, and it's air rights above the ground. Yeah.
All right, and this is going to be my final question. It's about the development of the housing units. You said that you have 2,000 units built now?
Built or being built, yes.
Being built. And the goal is 3,000?
The statutory goal is 3,000, correct?
Now, is that state-owned housing?
No, it is not. It's all private.
It's all private?
Yep. Yes, we make loans and equity investments the same way that Department of Housing might make a loan to a housing project somewhere else in the state.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate, you've got a wealth of knowledge. I probably could sit with you for hours just to try to understand this whole authority, but thank you so much.
Sure enough.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Representative Wood.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And like Senator Moore, I could sit with you for hours. This is fascinating. So 2 questions. One, on the housing units, what's the split between market rate and any subsidized?
Well, if I could redefine your terms. Everything's subsidized. We're in the game. So we're building both market and affordable.
Right.
The split for our portfolio is about 80, give me a second. As we sit here today, the split is about 86% market, 14% affordable. Now, we are not a quote unquote affordable housing agency. We weren't tasked with affordable housing. We were tasked with building housing, however it came along. We primarily do market rate for a lot of reasons. One, because we're not affordable. That's CHAFA and DOH and HUD and lots of other people. The problem was the market wasn't building market housing in big part because there was a gap between what it cost you to build and what it was worth at the end of the day, and nobody was funding that gap. That became our job. But if you look at the projects, the larger ones, they're basically 80-20 deals. For the most part, they're coming in with 20% affordable, and that's defined pretty broadly based on what funding sources they're using. Occasionally, we'll use tax credits, and they'll come along with a demand for a certain income target. Sometimes we'll use city funds. Sometimes there'll be a tax deal that'll trigger it. So the larger deals are running about 80-20. Some are at 90-10 based on their math. Overall, as we sit, I'm looking at the portfolio, we're at 86-14.
Great, thank you. That's good information. And the other question is, what is the capacity for the Excel Center now? Full with, I guess it depends what kind of event you're holding, but
yeah, exactly.
Say a UConn basketball game, I would think, or concert.
UConn is, we could probably squeeze standing room about 15,000 for UConn. The building can get up to 16,000 for certain events. That's because you put seats on the floor. All right, if you do a concert,
yep.
You kind of lay. But hockey takes up a bigger floor, so it's got a lower house. And then, of course, basketball's in between the two. That's about the max. The market niche, honestly, is probably in the 10 to 12 range.
Yeah, that was the goal of my question. Thank you.
That's what a building needs to be. That's honestly. Now, Elton John shows up, we'll put 16,000 in. But he don't come around but once every 5 or 6 years. So we'll have a half a dozen events a year that'll need 16,000 seats. The promoters want it. And frankly, the only way we're competitive with the Indians in the casinos is because they can underwrite shows at 10,000. We can't. So if we can get a house at 16,000, I can compete with the promoters because I can put 6,000 more people in the seats. And I can get a payment to the promoters and the performers that is equivalent to what the tribes are able to offer or other places can offer. So our math is different. So we need a bigger house to make up by the fact that we can't underwrite shows the way others do. But if you were to ask, what's the smart size of this building? It's probably 10 to 12. And what we've done when we've redesigned the program from the 250 level to the 100 million level is we sized it for 11 to 12, meaning we're building bathrooms, concessions, services for 11 to 12. But we'll still have the ability to go to 16,000 when we need it. Just that we're not building concessions and restrooms and other service needs for 4,000 or 5,000 seats that don't get used that much. And that's been able to bring our budget down. The single biggest thing is we eliminated a concourse structure. That was several $1 million in and of itself because we don't need to get upstairs that often. So for 16,000, you'll wait longer in a refreshment line than you will at 10,000. But at 10,000, you'll get through it pretty quick and we'll get your money. But that's the game in the business. And sizing the building has been a big effort to know the market. The Bridgeport facility is about 10. Mohegan's about 10. Springfield's about 6,500. But there's 25,000 in the meadows in Hartford when you sit outdoors. So for us, we think that's where we got to be. We're trying to price the building's development to that size. And I think that'll give you a better bang for your buck. It'll reduce some of the losses we're seeing. I think it'll be a smarter investment than simply pursuing a 16,000 seat house. The only issue is if every day comes along when someone needs that many seats, we can roll up screens and bring them in. So.
Okay, thank you. I was asking for general information also in the context of rebuild or repair, because I know a couple of years ago when we were debating this, it was, do we rebuild or repair? So, and knowing that 10,000 is a more marketable size or a manageable size is just good information to have.
Yep.
So
Okay.
again, thank you very much, Mike, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Wood. Senator Huang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. Obviously, the Excel Center is a big question. And obviously, the question was asked by Senator Moore. There is no buyers right now. Would that be correct?
That's fair. Yes.
Great. And thank you. But I wanted to pivot and talk about Rentzler in regards to, obviously, it hosts UConn football. But there was always a conversation about with COVID and outdoor arena sizes. Are there any plans to have outside concerts at Rentzler Field?
No. I mean, we talk about it, but there's two big factors that play against us. One, to operationalize Rentzler Field takes a pretty significant investment for a one-off concert. What you have to bring in the way of equipment, protection for the field being a big part of it. If it rains the day you have 10,000 people standing on that field, you'll be spending north of $150,000 repairing it tomorrow morning. So the margin's tight because we have to bring in so much equipment. It has been used in the past. Historically, there has been several large concerts out there. But it holds about 40,000. That's a pretty big house for a concert. That's the first problem. The second problem is this. The promoters, basically Live Nation, they control a facility they own with 25,000 seats in it. Why would they pay us to marginally do better at Rentzler Field? It wouldn't produce that much more for us in the way of revenues. They, in turn, would be sharing it differently. And they just don't have to do it. They got a pretty nice facility they're sitting on right now. Plus, they've married up with the folks down in Bridgeport for the renovation of the old Bluefish Stadium. And of course, there's the conversion of the tennis facility in New Haven to a concert facility as well. So we'd be competing with at least 3 other properties, one owned by the promoters and 2, basically trying to outprice us, already set up for concerts. It'd be tough to make Rentzler work in that scenario.
So truly, what are events being held at Rentzler beyond UConn football? And what is the cost of maintaining such a facility that you're saying is prohibitive in doing anything else with it? Well,
right now, Rentzler, up until about 2.5, 3 years ago, was running positive in its operational side. There was sufficient revenues to cover the operational expense. We took a hit with the reduction of attendance at the UConn football games. Frankly, it just fell off the table on us. Generally speaking, you need between 20 and 23,000 people in the building to break even in about 6 or 7 games. UConn has been averaging less than 10,000 people. So therein lies the single biggest problem we've had at Rentzler. If UConn can get into the low 20s again, that building will handle itself on an operational basis. The debt, for the most part, the original $92 million construction budget, that's pretty much been retired. That GO bond is on its last legs, last couple of years. So the debt service on it has been dramatically lowered. We will have to make some capital improvements. The building just has some wear and tear to it that's going to demand the out years. To go to your question of what other events, there's a boatload of events that are held in the parking lots. All kinds of community events are held out there that don't put a tax on the building per se. But the building, this year we have the National NCAA Finals for lacrosse, Memorial Weekend. That's a national event COVID has given us a lot of anxiety, but right now it's an on. And that's an event that'll produce revenue for the building and put activity in the structure. We generally get one large national soccer game a year. Those singular events are big paydays for us. We do well on them, and in the past few years have carried it. There's some ancillary revenues out there, everything from cell towers to other things that we put out there that we grab a nickel on. But I think the bottom line, Senator, is if UConn football can get in the 20 to 25,000 range with attendance over 6 or 7 games, you won't have a concern about the operational loss for Rentzler. But until they do, we have that problem. And that's what we've been living with the last couple of years.
What is the money requested on the allocation going to be used for on Rentzler?
Rentzler, we have, I believe, let me just pull it up. I believe we got 7.6 million that is unallocated. That is actually split between Rentzler and the convention center. But the biggest issue we have out there right now is the roofs. We also have some water retention issue in the sub areas. The field is actually below grade. So there's a water retention issue that we still fight. And third, HVAC systems are all getting pretty peaked out.
It seems like a eerily similar story to the XL. So what would it take for your entity to look to compete with the likes of Live Nation? I think you mentioned earlier, we don't get Elton John because we don't have enough capacity at the XL Center. An outdoor arena of that size could attract a bigger act despite the marketplace control of Live Nation. What would it take for your entity to look at making Rentzler a multiple use in light of the post-COVID environment that I hope for us to be in for outdoor arena-based events?
I could get back to you what it would take us to have the equipment and the staff available to mobilize for such an event. I don't believe we've ever had enough events, even in the best of years, to compete with the facilities that are out there. I think that's a pretty high reach for that facility, frankly. But I can get back to you what it would cost to capital upgrade it. I think the fundamental problem is there aren't that many big shows. I mean, Elton John's an exception. You'll have a few others that can, really smoke a big house. But you're not going to get a lot of them. And the issue with simple issue with the outdoor facilities is you can't control the weather. You could sell a lot of tickets. They don't show up, you're in big trouble for no other reason that you can get washed out pretty quickly. That's a risk factor. We're not we try not to be anyway, too far into the risk business, but because we are using public resources. But for us to compete, 25,000 versus Rentzler that might get between 25 and 40,000, it's tough to compete against what's sitting in the North Meadows here. It's very tough to bring that thing home. They're set up for it. Basically, the performers know it. And we'd have to offer them a pretty big house. Not only that, we'd have to give them a pretty big piece of the action to make up for them simply booking in their own building.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you. The second area of interest that I have is the various parking garages that's going to be funded in this allocation that you requested. But Laz is a privately owned parking garage company. Where is your organization is it a joint public-private partnership? Is this money going to support this kind of initiative? Some of it spinning off to your organization as an entity and some of it to a private entity?
No, Laz is a vendor to us. They simply operate our buildings. It's purely our rates. They pay us a fee. I'm sorry, they pay us a fee, but more critically, the overall revenues of the building run the buildings doesn't go to Laz at all. I misspoke. There is a fee that we pay Laz to run the buildings, but the revenues from the buildings basically carry themselves. The biggest issue you have to distinguish is how those individual buildings were funded or financed. In the case of the convention center, those garages were financed with state revenue bonds. We are obligated to take the revenues, sweep them, and pay off those bonds. So that's where that money goes. We operate the building, take what's left, and we toss it to the revenue bond. In the case of Church Street, we own that outright. If there's a surplus on Church Street, we dedicate it to the XL. Church Street's actually operated by Pro Park, a different parking vendor. So the garages are publicly owned buildings where LAS simply gets a fee to operate them on our behalf. All revenues go to retire debt or to support the XL.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mike, thanks for your time and this information. Welcome to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Huang. Senator Cusano.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're good, Senator, to go.
We're good. Okay. I wanted to usually have a delay on my end here. A couple of questions, Mike. Thank you, first of all. I think your exchange answering questions and so on with Senator Moore was very, very helpful to me. A couple of things, though. UConn basketball hasn't been mentioned in this conversation, at least that I've heard today. I've been in for the hockey games. I get a pretty good crowd. It's not the same, obviously, as a basketball game. What is the contract situation with UConn basketball, both men and women, in the casinos? Because that's a major loss for us. Is there any chance of that changing?
I'm not familiar with what agreements UConn has with the casinos. That's really out of my world, if you will. We have a longstanding agreement with UConn for the 3 sports that play downtown, the men's hockey team, as well as the women's and men's basketball teams. They play a certain percentage of their games downtown. We average somewhere between 25 to 30 games across those 3 sports in any one year. It'll vary based on the calendar and the sport. Roughly half of it is the hockey team, maybe 15 games, and the basketball teams maybe 8 apiece, 6, 7, 8 apiece, depending on, again, the season. The attendance for a women's game runs much lower than the men's game, and hockey runs lower than the women's game. Hockey probably averages around 3,500, 4,000. We've had some peak days at 8,000, which has been a nice house. Basketball, women's basketball's had a few peaks when you get Stanford or South Carolina in. You'll get 12, 13,000 in the building. But most part it runs in the 6, 7,000 range. And the men's game can peak up 14, 15 if you get a real good house, a real good game on a real good night. But probably truly averages in the 10 to 12 range. Often 8,000 if you get a game on a Tuesday night in December. It might not draw well. We generally rent the building to UConn. They pay us a fee to rent the property, and we then get a fee for game day events, things we have to do special and unique to them. The rest of the games are spread across either the store's facility, or occasionally they'll be in a tournament down in New York, or they'll be out at the casinos. So our understanding going forward is we'll have a new agreement with UConn. We're still trying to figure out how that'll read. But the idea behind it is now to split the revenues differently. Historically, we rent the building to them. They get all the ticket revenue, and we sell the food and beverage. And so we get rent, beverage that helps write the building, and they sell a bigger house. That's kind of the scenario we've been living with for the better part of the last 20 years. The new agreement would envision sharing revenues, where we all share in the ticket sales and we share in the food and beverage and the premium seating upgrades. Conceivably, that'll produce more revenues for both of us. We've been negotiating that a little bit as to how many suites one could sell and how many we should build, and what kind of club seating and what it does to their sponsorship structure, which is ingrained in the overall athletic budget. So it gets into some pretty arcane stuff. We have been on a year-to-year renewal of that rental agreement while we've been trying to figure out where we're going with the XL Center. And until we commit to the redevelopment program, we probably will stay on a year-to-year basis. But really, their agreement with the Mohegan is really something UConn be better positioned to answer than I. So.
And I understand that, but it's encouraging to see that you're at least negotiating, and you know, as obviously as the team goes, so goes the crowd. If they continue to play the kind of basketball or whatever it might be, both male and female, that's going to draw people. You mentioned about staff available. Are there separate staffs, as an example, for Rentzler and the in the center and places, or is it a staff sharing process?
I wish there were a simple answer to that. It's a little of both. There are some core staff that stay with each building, that they're tied to those buildings. It might be an engineer who knows that building better than most. It might be the management team. For the most part, the convention center staff stays in the convention center. The Rentzler/XL often gets shared. There's management and engineering assigned to both buildings, but the staff that basically gets hired on a part-time basis is available for all the various tasks you can envision, from security to cleaning to screening to ticket sales to what have you. And we move them between the facilities.
And the last question, Mike, is you have various expos, different shows as an example. I can't imagine they're a great revenue generator, but they're at least help pay the bills.
Yeah, we don't do as many shows in the XL Center anymore because, frankly, the convention center beats it out. So we're arguing against ourselves a little bit. The XL Center, the exhibition hall, is extremely tired. It's subterranean. It's dark. It's dreary. Event guys just don't want to go there. We get a few. They pay their way. They pay their bills. Adds little bucks to the bottom line. But for the most part, the convention business, the conferences, the trade shows have shifted to the convention center. And we get about 300,000 people going through maybe 100 events a year that manifest themselves through that initiative. So
does that put you in a spot where you have to make a choice with renovating that whole downstairs area of the Civic Center or closing it down? Is that
yeah, we're not going to invest in the exhibition halls of the Civic Center. It will never pay back. And frankly, we can use the space. The idea is to take all the mechanical and back of house things that are complicating the arena and push it into the old exhibition hall and expand the arena and its opportunity to raise money inside the actual event hall. So in a way, the exhibition hall gives us the space we need to put the back of the house. And then the arena can make a better buck by better using its space.
Good. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Pisano. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Hi, Mike. Thanks for being here. Nice to connect with you today. Just a couple questions. I know you mentioned a little bit about the convention center, but I am interested in hearing kind of the status, particularly around the revenue picture right now, with the proportion of funds under your proposal, and what you all are just thinking as you look at conventions in a post-COVID world, because the timing of those certainly, I think, are changing, and how they might be set up are changing based on what the real life picture might look like for organizations and companies coming together after COVID.
Yeah, it's the $64 million question, or in the case of the XL Center, $100 million question. The trade show business, you know, I guess we could all come up with an opinion of what it's going to look like post-COVID. I mean, right now, you know, rather than us sitting around a committee room, we're all scattered across the state on video tubes. And we would expect that business is going to probably grow and probably cut into what has been historically, you know, business conferences and things of that nature. We don't fully understand it yet. To the extent corporate business travel is down, so too with the convention center business. And convention center business breaks itself out in about 3 different ways. There's the business basic conferences, trade shows, things of that nature. There's consumer events. We might go to the boat show or the car show or the, you know, garden show or whatever it might be that appeals to you. And then there's a series of other events. You know, we have high school volleyball tournaments and, you know, other types of things like that, private events, graduation ceremonies and things of that nature. We would expect that kind of business to continue. We would expect the larger consumer shows to come back around when people feel comfortable and they want to get out of the house in January to go look at, the latest kitchen upgrades. You're going to get that traffic, and it'll reboot itself. We have a little bit more competition than we once did because Mohegan built an exhibition hall and tries to undermine our prices. So we have a little bit more of a tension in pricing that business than we did even 2-3 years ago, just because of what the casinos have built. But I think that volume will be there to some level. The one element that is hard to forecast is the trade show, business travel, conference. That too is impacting the hotels, and frankly, it's impacting airlines. And a lot of it has to do with liability issues related to the business, wholly unrelated to us. And some of it has to do with just employee resistance to travel. Again, I think that some of that will come back. There's still a networking. There's still a lot more you get done by seeing three or four people you do business with and calling them up on the phone or dealing with a Zoom. So I think some of that will come back. Hard for us to forecast. We don't plan to open the convention center until September. We have asked and tried to rearrange those events that we're interested in the summer to go into the fall, because there's not enough of them to justify the cost to open the buildings and hire all the staff back. And so we're trying to manage it the best we can. We think obviously next year is going to be a year that's going to be off the mark from what we have done historically. We had an increase in business. We were generally increasing each year. Our revenues to the state were greater than the state's cost to run the building. So it was carrying itself, if you will, on an operational side. It was producing probably between 6 and 7 million to the state in various revenue streams, and it was costing the state about 3 to run it. And that in turn, to go to the question we raised a little earlier, is that pushes hotel trade, restaurant trade, front street trade, parking garage trade, and all the rest of it. So we think we're going to miss that mark. We don't, frankly, whatever mark we make right now, we're not certain of. It's a bit of a shot in the dark. But we do have events queuing up. We do have promoters and event organizers calling us. We do have holds going on to the calendar that haven't quite reached contract stage yet. So we definitely will have an uptick. We definitely will have some activity in the properties. Just not sure how it's all going to pencil out just yet. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for walking through that, because I think it's helpful to hear that maybe kind of 2/3 of the full amount of business, as you highlighted, could come back sooner than the final third potentially. So that's just helpful to kind of hear you break that out in that way. Okay. And then just my second question, are you all engaged, and just wanted an update on this, particularly around the Front Street projects, and just trying to understand your role in those and how, timing is working with those at this moment?
Well, Front Street was built as part of Adrian's Landing. The state of Connecticut, through us, owns the land under the buildings. The buildings were developed with some state assistance and private monies. It makes up both retail as well as, retail as well as some entertainment facilities. All of them have taken it on the chin over the last year. I think we were pretty close to almost full in Front Street. We lost one restaurant, got another one I'm a little concerned about. The activity level in the others has dropped. And more critically, the movie and basically the Playhouse, or the Infinity Theater, hard to know where they're going. I don't know where movies are going. So we're a bit concerned about the theater complex as well as the Xfinity Theater. So at this stage, it's holding its own. It's really the private investors who are at most risk. We get a pilot payment, which is like a tax that goes into maintaining the grounds. We did have some capital money that went into it a couple of years ago, and we had to repair some of the garages and some of the storm sewer systems, and we've just completed most of that work. The residents are almost fully occupied. 2 buildings that were built are pretty close to fully occupied. They run 85 to 90% occupancy. And of course, UConn campus has been very quiet with COVID. And that gives us parking revenue when the school's active, and obviously put some kids on the street for some of the restaurants during the daytime. With the school coming back, I think Front Street will get a little bump. With COVID rules lightening up, I think we'll see Xfinity come back online. The movie just went through a change of management. They haven't even had a chance to open the doors yet. And I honestly don't have any crystal ball on the movie house. Restaurants are going to be tough. They're going to struggle for a while. And that's kind of where we sit at the moment. So.
Thank you, Mike, for updating us on that and just updating your finalization, it sounds like, of some of the projects that you've been working on there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Farrar. And we are narrowing down to our hour time frame. And we do have DAS in the queue. So we do have another couple of questions or comments. I just want to remind folks that if we can try to stick to our time frame, that would be great. So with that, Representative Claritas Petro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mike, for being here today. I'll make my questions fast. Do you know how much to date the state has put into the Excel Center?
We had over time, I couldn't give it to you, but over the last 12 years or 10 years or so, there was 40 million that was allocated, I believe 2013, might have been 2014 by the time it all got out. Those monies went to stabilize the building and sort of button her up, deal with a lot of problems that were developed that time. That's pretty much been spent out. There was another 40 million that was allocated, of which we've used about 15. That 40 is part of that $100 million budget, if you will. That 40 plus the 65 that is still on the shelf makes up that $100 million renovation program. So of that first tranche of 40, we burned down about 15 or 16 of it.
And then how about the same question for Rentzler?
Rentzler hasn't really had, I mean, other than the initial construction, we've not done a lot with Rentzler. We replaced the field, we did some waterproofing, we did some land upgrades. I think our draw on Rentzler, if you give me a minute, I don't think it's been much more than 4 or 5 million over the last few years.
But does it need a lot of work?
Actually, Rentzler, it depends on who you talk to, I suppose.
Okay. All right. I guess where I'm getting in this, all the money that we're putting into these venues, are we better off knocking something down or closing and building something that'll accommodate everybody else? Because we keep putting, as you know, all this money into it. Are they going to be money pits, or do we get rid of them and start from scratch, which may be more cost effective? That's, I guess, to wrap it up. I don't want to take too much time to see if what you think about that.
Well, you're traveling at 40,000 feet and looking down. All these buildings are loss leaders. All these buildings drive something else. I think a stadium like Rentzler is a little bit tougher than a convention center, or for that matter, an arena. They all do different things. They drive hotels and restaurants and commercial activity that is measured outside the box of the building. So you have to look at them as sort of jump starting, if you will, like a battery to a larger engine. And when you shut them down, you have impact all over the place. And I think that's why you got to draw a line on not just the operating or the capital needs of each business, but what are they pushing in the larger context of the local economy. I think Rentzler's a little tougher. Rentzler ought to be a standalone facility that ought to pay its way. And frankly, if UConn would get 20 to 25, I think it will pay its way. There will always be a capital need. It's not much different than building a park or a library or a school building. You're going to have to put capital into these buildings.
Right.
At
Exactly.
Point,
we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what will happen with UConn. And we want, this is what you said, this is what we need to be profitable. But unfortunately, we don't know what's going to make UConn change. But I appreciate your answers. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. So Mike, I just want to round out the conversation around the Excel. We talked about what the seating capacity is, 16,000 max. Typically it's around 12,000. You expect it maybe to come back at 2/3 capacity, 2/3 the amount of events, if I heard right. So how many events, to try to calculate, how many events in a non-COVID year typically are there at the, let's say, 12,000 rate?
Okay, 2/3 I was speaking in 2/3 of the type of events was for the convention center,
Oh, okay,
not XL.
okay.
XL essentially relies on Yukon sports, those three sports, plus concerts, plus a variety of family shows. It might be an ice show or, gymnastic show and things of that nature. Historically, we get between 500,000 and 600,000 people through the buildings over the course of about 125 to 150 events at the XL. We don't know what the forecast going into this next year. I would think if Yukon comes in and plays its schedule of 30, we get 35 to 40 minor league hockey games, plus a variety of smaller concerts and family shows. We probably will get close to 100 to 120 events next year, which will not be far off our historical average. Generally speaking, the summers are quiet. The XL really doesn't run in the summertime. It might have an event. So our event load is really September to June. And September to June is where we have events queued up between the minor league hockey and Yukon and some holds. We're close to 100 already. So I think it's going to come around. The issue I can't answer for you is how many people are going to go to those events. What's the attendance going to be for some of these shows? We may actually have a hockey game going on, but are we going to get the same average house size we got a year ago? Just because I can forecast events, I can at this hour forecast the attendance at these events, and that's what's got us cautious. We make money on selling tickets and selling food and frankly, how best to staff the building. We could overstaff the building, frankly. If historically we get 4,000 people for an event and we get 1,500, I got a lot of staff taking down cash, sitting around, not working. Not smart economics, but I don't know how to forecast that as we sit here. So we're still cautious on this. I think the bigger problem is not the number of events, but how well they'll be attended and
I was
participated.
just trying to come up with a rough amount, right? So you're saying about 500 to 600,000 in a typical year.
Typical, yeah.
Typical
Yeah.
year, unknown. Even if we take half of that, that's 250 to 300,000
Right.
persons, foot traffic in
Right.
Hartford that
Right.
otherwise wouldn't be there. And I know you've been talking about a lost leader. We've talked about the expense that it takes to invest in the upkeep of the Excel. But if we can quantify, if there's any way you can quantify through economic development what that does for the industry. I'm co-chair. I have the pleasure of co-chairing the Arts, Culture, and Tourism Caucus, which is starving, right? Starving for activity in the state and investment. And this, it sounds to me, would you say is the number one driver of activity in the Hartford region?
Well, the XL is the grandfather of a lot of the activity in downtown. I mean, you have the Hartford Stage and the Bushnell and things of that nature that have all the same issues. Frankly, they don't know whether to book events because they don't know how many people are going to be able to go out and want to attend.
Yeah.
We're all guessing at that.
Even if you took half of that 500,000, that's
Yep.
250,000 people in Hartford that wouldn't ordinarily be there, in addition to the parking in the restaurants.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's been a really worthy conversation if we could quantify around the economic, economies for those restaurants, the hotels. I've been at the Hilton when there's something going on at the Excel, and I've been at the Hilton when there's not something going on.
Look
Night
at
and day, I don't know if those facilities would survive.
we have an economic development study that's based on a normalized year. Crudely one can forecast a discount from that. We can share that with the committee because we've looked at that. We've looked at that issue. So I'll send it over to the committee staff and you can circulate it.
Yeah, I think we need a true picture. When we talk about expenses, but what is the revenue driver? What can we quantify what that revenue is coming into the Hartford, and a little bit more information on the jobs it produces as well would be terrific.
Okay. Yeah, and I just have my finance team gave me an update. We spent over the last 5 years just $2.5 million at Rentzler in capital upgrades.
At Rentzler.
At Rentzler, yeah. That was a question I believe Representative Claridis had. So.
Yep. Okay, great. I think she's still on. Okay, well, let's hope the football attendance comes back. Let's hope we're we're back at more than 2/3. We hope the whole state comes back. But we really appreciate it's been, you're a walking encyclopedia of knowledge of statistics. It's been very helpful. We'll look for that follow-up information and I'll send it out to all the committee members.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike.
We're good to go?
We're good to go.
Have fun.
Thank you.
So I believe Rep. Orr, the next group for DAS is here. Not sure who's leading. Is the commissioner here? Let me see.
Yep, we are here.
All right.
So, good afternoon. My name is Lee Ross. I'm the legislative and administrative advisor for the department. Commissioner Jabal, who was planning on being here, could not be here, so he sends his apologies. He's busy with all of the activities related to the pandemic. Also, Eleanor Michael, who is our chief legislative and policy advisor, is suffering through the side effects of her COVID vaccine yesterday, so she's not able to be here. So I'm gonna sit in the chair and just give you a brief overview of what we've got. You should have our written testimony with all of our attachments, breakdowns. So with me, I have several people. I have Deputy Commissioner Noel Petra, who runs our real estate and construction division. We've got Costa Diamantis, who's the Deputy Secretary of OPM, and also the Director of the Office of School Construction. And I also have other people here who could, happy to answer any questions that you may have. So essentially, we have in the governor's budget request this year, the capital budget, we have 5 main categories. We have school construction grants, which makes up the bulk of the request, and that's $550 million. We also administer infrastructure program, which is for repairs and improvements to state-owned properties. And we have a request for $15 million in the second year of the biennium. We also have a hazardous materials grant program, and that's run through the school construction, the Office of School Construction. And that is budgeted for or requested for $10 million in each of the next 2 fiscal years. That, we'll be happy to answer questions on that. We also run an Americans with Disabilities Act improvement program. That's through our facilities division. And that right now we've requested for FY 2022 $1 million. And then we have the last significant or category is the Connecticut building at the Eastern States Exposition, and we have requested or the recommended for fiscal year 2022 is $1 million, and that's for just basic maintenance and upkeep of the building to make sure that it's safe when and if the biggie goes this fall and people are in the building. So that's sort of an overview. Again, we've attached information on the bonding. We also have an unallocated bond balance report for you. We also have a copy of our 3-year capital improvement plan, our facilities management pipeline report. Those are projects that are in the pipeline, and then also a document summarizing unallocated and recommended bonding related to school construction grant program and the hazardous materials program. So with that, I'm open it up to questions, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions yet, so I'm just going to kick off with a couple if that's okay, and then I'll turn it over to the others. So who did you say was here to talk about the fire training funding?
That would be Doug Moore.
Okay, I will get back to that in a moment. I do see some hands are starting to pop up, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say probably some of the questions are related to school construction. So I just wanted to ask maybe a leading question to help level set and maybe frame out school construction and how it works to help, because, you know, as part of my learning curve, learning all the agencies, I've been trying to get my arms around just how school construction, the process works. So I was hoping, I know you said Costas was on. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Can you just
Good, how are
walk
you?
us through? Can you just walk us through from beginning to end? You know, Avon needs a new elementary school. What are the steps? I don't know, maybe they do. What are the steps that a town or a city goes through to secure funding for their school from beginning to end, as high level as you can, knowing there's complexities?
Sure. Thanks for having me, and certainly good to see you all. And my good friend going back to 92, my friend Mr. Piscopo sitting up there quietly. How are you? I had to say hello. The process, we've evolved since I've taken over in the last 5 or 6 years, where we've tried to have a good partnership with the communities, working with the reps, senators, both sides of the aisle. It's probably one of the few programs that is as bipartisan as it gets. All of us have an interest in having good quality schools and ensuring that they have what they need in their particular schools, meeting the enrollment needs and achieving the academic excellence that we can in adequate school buildings. The process usually begins, and at least now, is they usually reach out to us, and they're indicating to us that there is a plan to either renovate a school or possibly build a new school, possibly consolidate, whatever their reasons are. And one of the things that we've always asked communities to do now is look holistically at the district. Talk about your enrollment numbers. What do they look like over the next 8 years, 10 years? What has happened in the past 5 years? Give us a good plan of where you see the kids going from preschool to elementary, to middle school to high school. Bring that plan to us along with what your ideas are and what you would like to do in your particular town. And most of the time they will have brought on board an architect, which by statute they're allowed to do, to assist them and come up with a schematic design and a proposal for what it is they'd like to do. And we'll sit with them, our team of architects, myself. I always sit at the beginning meetings to set the guidelines and the parameters of what we can and cannot do, making sure that we've answered all the questions of the districts and they don't go down the wrong path, that they don't get eligibility for their funding. Because one of the things we want to make sure is they maximize their investment. Whatever they're entitled to, we'd like them to get. A lot of the questions when they're designing schools are about special ed needs, special ed programs. A lot of the districts are looking to bring back their special ed students that are usually out of district and wanting them to be back home, close to their families and close to other students. We work with the districts to ensure that's occurring. One of the things that's within our statutory authority, of course, in the best interest of the state, is to ensure that they're not getting penalized for bringing those kids home. We recognize the fact that sometimes funding is reduced and the excess cost sharing grant as it relates to special ed, so on and so forth. So, and we also recognize that school buildings are in fact the second most utilized building in any city next to roads and bridges. And it's probably one of the most important facilities in the town. So they'll come through those recommendations. If it is a priority district, the list that you see, that comes to you as a priority school district, because it's usually a new school, a renovation of a school, a reauthorization of a project, something along those lines. Deadline is June 30th to have all their funding allocation, all the local requirements, statutory requirements that are needed from the Board of Ed and to the town, and submit that application by June 30th. Since I took over, we got rid of the great Wang system we operated on, using $500 million of money. And we now have an updated system in which it's all automated. Everything goes online. And they'll submit their funding resolutions, their authorizations, and their educational specifications. And at that point in time, we place it on the priority list. I send it out by statute to the governor on or before December 15th. At that point, I also send it to the legislature. The priority committee meets. The priority committee is a combination of appropriations and finance and education. And meet and then pass that on to the normal process, which it begins, the priority list then begins in the education committee, and it finds its way through all the various committees that it needs to, usually finance after education. And once approved by the legislature, governor signs it, and it becomes law. And then we begin that process. What we try to do, because time is money in construction, we work with the district under the impression, for the most part, barring any unforeseen circumstances, that the legislature is going to approve the priority list, because we always have, because it is bipartisan, and we try to work with those districts and move them along so we don't miss a construction season. We don't miss the time that's essential, depending on what their project is like. Especially when kids are out of school, we like to do abatement of buildings, so on and so forth. So timeline is important. Facilitating that process is important. We are not just a grant program. And first of all, school construction is not an entitlement, right? So it's a partnership between the district and the town. You get all your ducks in a row. We work with you. And I actually assign one of the architects to a project, so the town has somebody to reach out to and monitor the project beginning to end with them on those types of projects. And we have been quite successful. As a matter of fact, if you looked at your prior priority lists, you have not seen too many reauthorizations. We work hard on the numbers to bring them down. If the numbers go down for the state, that means they go down for the municipalities. They don't have to spend as much. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for good quality buildings at the right price, and what we think is the right price. And we ensure that the spaces meet the needs of the superintendent, who, by the way, is the head of the LEA, and that's who answers to us, is the superintendent. The mayors would like to think it's the mayors, but it's not. It's the superintendent. The mayors get upset because they say we paid a bill, but unfortunately the statute says it's the superintendent. They're in charge of the academics for the local district. They react to us and they answer to us. And we have a great relationship with, I think, 169 towns and RESCs and everybody else that we deal with, and the tech schools, of course. There are also the non-priority school projects. Non-priority of those like roofs, ADA, elevator projects on the exterior of buildings, window projects, code compliance projects, school safety projects, thanks to you folks. We took those off the priority list because you can imagine if it's school safety, we certainly don't want to hold up school safety, and we want to move it right along. And so those projects go every month. A district is allowed to apply within the first 10 days of each and every month for a non-priority project. We react to those, we assist them with that, and then we approve those internally. A letter goes out for approval on that, and we begin those projects. So we have those running continuously as the priority projects are going as well. And of course, you know, we handle the tech schools. So all the technical high schools, we do those as well.
Great, thank you very much. And that actually leads to my next question. So does the process differ for VOTEX, and does it differ for magnet schools?
The process for building any school is no different. Everybody needs to submit their grant applications. Of course, there's a moratorium on magnets. To build a magnet or to build a tech school, it needs to be submitted through school construction. I will tell you, before I started, it was a little loosey-goosey. It is not loosey-goosey anymore. And to the point where we've actually set up a separate SID account so that I have funds that I commit to the tech schools. So I know what we're spending on our state schools versus what we are spending on our municipalities that go through the regular progress payment process.
And do we?
I lost you on that, sorry.
I'm sorry, do we have that breakdown?
Well, it changes, as you can imagine, year to year. I can tell you this year, we're probably in the neighborhood of 150 towards the tech schools. And we have 2 special projects we're completing, and that are the 2 CREC magnet schools that are the remaining 2 magnet schools for them by agreement. And one is Anna Grace, and the other is Aerospace. The Construction Services Department of DAS is doing that project for CREC, as opposed to the project managing their own project. And between the tech schools and those two schools, we've been averaging in the last couple of years about 150 million to move those projects along, and they are at a very rapid pace. And the balance of 400 is progress payments as it relates to the other 169 towns that we may be working in.
Okay, and then on the magnets, you had mentioned there's a moratorium, but if the moratorium is on building new magnets, but there's not a moratorium on
Renovations.
Renovations, because they're all getting about 20 years, right? So what are the plans within this 550 million for magnet schools?
Our budget is based on what we anticipate for schools coming in. So we try to work with the districts that are coming to us. And as of now, I'm not aware of any school that's come to us that we've turned away.
Okay. So
Are there particular magnet schools you're referring to, Representative?
no, I just know there's a moratorium on magnet schools, but I also
Yes.
know we're hitting the 20-year mark, and there's going to be, you know, they're going to be due for renovations.
Sure.
In particular, when it comes to, you know, there are schools that have, you know, specific disciplines, so I'm sure they need specific
Absolutely.
equipment, right?
Right.
So I just want to understand that. Okay.
I do want to put on your radar, Representative, and to the rest of the committee, there is discussion with respect to the renovation of the CREC chef schools. And if I put my legal hat on, there may be some issues with those, because while we were very quick in deciding that we were building the chef schools for the desegregation purpose with respect to the lawsuit, and I'm not certain that the chef magnet schools fall into the same place as other magnets and RESCs. I have brought that to the attention of others in the leadership, of course, in the House and in the Senate. That's something they may want to clarify, the AG's office, but I think that's something that needs to be looked at as a separate animal from the RESCs and the typical magnet schools that we have built.
So are you, I'm trying to understand, you're saying look at it separate, they should be looked at it separately than the process that we go through today?
Yeah, I think the statute's been pretty clear about how they were built and why they were built, but then they didn't fall into the normal RESC, because of course CREC is a RESC, and their program is at 80%. And if you look at the requirement of the statute, it says 95%, if a school needs to be two conditions, 95% plus the ownership, I believe it was. And I don't have the statute in front of me, unfortunately, but I certainly can provide you some of my concerns and my research, just for some clarification that you need to occur.
Okay, great. I do see some questions building up in the queue. I just wanted to, you know, have you outline the process of maybe that could help formulate the questions. And then I do have more, but I want to be respectful of my colleagues. Just one other, you know, point is that we had the Department of Education before us last week, and we asked them their role in the decision-making process with respect to school construction. And they indicated that their role was very limited, that they typically provide statistics. And you mentioned the priority committee consists of appropriate finance and education. Did you mean legislative members, or did you mean agency members are part of that?
Legislative members.
Okay, that's for that bond bill that goes through the education committee.
That is correct.
Correct, okay.
The input that the State Department of Education has with us, that I rely on them, is if a district wants to do a preschool program, if it meets the requirements of whatever SDE requires, if it for some reason is a charter school, what the State Department of Education has done with respect to their charter and doesn't meet any approvals there. If it is a VOAG school, the input from oversight and approval of the program on the VOAG school and the approval of a program on the VOTech schools, anything that's programmatic, because that would come, of course, from the State Department of Education, because it's programmatic, not construction.
Got it. All right, I'm going to move to the other questions, and then I'll come back with my others. So with that, I'm going to Representative Claire Petria.
Hello, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm at work doing two things at once. Lee, thank you for being here today. I don't know who can answer my question, but my first one is, what's the current state of how the fire training school system? Where are we with that?
That would
Well,
not be me.
Yeah, I think Deputy Commissioner Petra will be able to answer that.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. To give you,
Left.
to
Sorry.
give you, that's okay. To give you the status of the fire training, basically at this point we are on hold. I can give you a status report on what has been built and what is in the queue. We have recently finished Fairfield. That was completed in 2016. Burville was completed in 2018. Eastern and Willimantic was completed in 2019. The next one up is Valley Beacon Falls. That went out to bid as a design build project, and then it was put on hold. We've been asked numerous times to ask that builder to hold their price.
Okay, what about, what's the status of Beacon Falls?
So it's still on hold, pending
And
bonding.
do we know why it's on hold?
I do not know.
Okay, well, I assume the bottom line is the governor put it on and he put it on hold. So I guess we need to get that onto the bond commission. But thank you. Thank you,
You're
Madam
welcome.
Chair.
Thank
You need
thank you, Rep-
If you need any further information, let me know.
thank you, Representative. I want to.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, I don't know if I could do this. Hey, Tom, I'm going to go to Maryland, but after Senator Moore, but after I do, can you make me host for a minute on the regional fire training schools?
Yeah, you want to be host?
Well, let's go to Senator Moore because she's been waiting, and then we could come back to me, and I just want to pull back up the regional fire schools so we can further discuss.
Okay.
Senator Moore.
Thank you. I want to go follow up on something that Costa said earlier regarding the priority list. Does that list get approved through bonding, or does that get approved through, just let me just ask you this, how does that list get approved?
Okay, yeah, there is two. What gets approved is through the legislature, the priority list projects. So there's a list before you now, before the legislature now, as you know. And what you would approve is all the projects on that list, unless you choose not to, of course, or in some cases, add projects to the list. But that is the list. What happens at the bond commission is each year I go back, at least while I've been here, I'll go back once or maybe twice a year to get funding to pay for those projects as they are progressing. Because it's a pay as you go and in the sense of a reimbursement program. So the towns have expended funds on those projects that you approve on the priority list, and they're expecting me to pay them back their percentage of reimbursement. So I rely on the bond funds, that $550 million that I'm asking for in the current bond bill is to pay for projects that are already underway.
And so, so you get a certain amount of money through the bond bill, and then you disseminate that money to the projects. They draw down on that money
No.
ahead of time, or as they complete the work?
As they complete the work, they need to verify the amounts that they paid, the invoices, who they went to. We confirm the amounts. We confirm the work as being done, and then we reimburse.
Thank you. And then yesterday, the governor opened up a new round of state grants to improve school security infrastructure. How does that impact you?
I'm on the committee that the funds go through the State Department of Education, but DESPE is in control of those funds, in control of the applications. I, through school construction, SDE and DESPE worked together collaboratively to review the grant applications that are submitted to DESPE and then make an award.
And so does any of this money that's being offered now in the way of grants, does that have any impact on what you've proposed so far for your construction?
No, they're separate and distinct.
Okay. Thank you.
You
And
bet.
then I just want to go back to, I think it's Mr. Ross. We went right to school construction, but it would be helpful to understand how you work with all these other agencies that you're assisting.
I think that Doug Moore might be the one to help you there. Doug?
Mr. Moore, are you there?
Senator, yes, I am. Actually, that is more of DAS construction services. I do facility management. So buildings that are under control of DAS is the program that I manage. I think what you're asking is how our sister division construction services works with all the other facility oriented agencies and doing major construction projects.
You're correct.
Oh, I can answer that. I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. So the way that it works, we actually just put in a new system in coordination with Costa and his team over at OPM, where all of the agencies that we do construction work for will develop a 10-year plan that is updated every year, that provides DAS and OPM every year before the end of the fiscal year for the upcoming fiscal year, a list of priority projects with budgets. DAS will review those lists, make sure that all the information is there, that the scope is clear, that the costs are correct and accurate. Once we review that, then we'll share that information with OPM, who will then go ahead and decide what are the priorities and how much we have to spend given our budget. And then that will become the final list of projects to be done on the next fiscal year.
And that's
For
an
each agency.
automated system?
No, it's not an automated system.
It's not.
It's a manual system. No, there's quite a bit of work that goes into this system. It really, what it does is it requires the agencies to think about their business plan and then match their facilities to the business plan, and then match their existing facilities to the facilities that they need to match the business plan. That way everything's coordinated and we make sure that they have the accurate budgets. Sometimes we get inaccurate budgets. We're trying to filter that out before these costs come to you guys so that you don't have to waste your time. It's really should be a much more efficient process.
And the other thing is, you can imagine, Senator, that everybody is competing and saying their project is more important than the other person's project. So what we want to ensure is, in fact, a review of the projects submitted. For instance, if it's roof projects, how old are those roofs? Chillers, heating systems, whatever they may be, so that we're not competing with one another, but in fact creating a true priority for the bond committee to determine how much funding to provide based on actual need versus want.
And so there's a 10-year plan for all the projects?
There
will be, yes.
There will be.
Yes.
And then
Well,
you'll go back
like the Board of
revisit
Regents.
and evaluate?
Yes, exactly.
And when does the bonding commission committee see that?
That will happen after OPM reviews it. I assume that'll be provided to you by OPM.
All right.
That is true. We would actually do it collaterally and collaboratively together with DAS once we're all on the same page. And then we would submit it to you, so you would see what that report looks like. The whole idea
right now, the way that it works is we get.
Go ahead.
Right now, the way it works is we get requests for projects basically at random. Different agencies are better at it than others. Sometimes, when I call and ask, well, you just submitted an 1105, what is this for? Is this a priority? They don't even know that they submitted it. So, Costa and I decided we really needed a much more organized system, a much more predictable system. We need to know not only on a yearly basis, but we need to know on a 5 and I know 10 years is a little inaccurate, but at least we have an idea where we're going over the next 5 years as far as costs. And really what DAS and OPM will give the agencies the expertise that they need to develop these plans. We'll give them the guidance and we walk them through the whole process so that, because a lot of these facility folks, their expertise in something else, and they're kind of assigned to manage their facilities. And so we give them, third party outside expertise to help them organize their business, organize their facilities, and make really good, really efficient decisions.
And so OPM is overseeing all this. Is that correct?
It's in collaboration with DAS. OPM makes the final decision. DAS gathers all the info and coordinates it and sorts through it and makes sure it's accurate. And then OPM does oversee, the final decisions. Yes.
And Senator, if I might add, maybe what we should do is send the committee the form that we're sending out to the agencies. So if we send that to you, you'll have a better idea what it is that we're asking for and what the compilation looks like.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. Appreciate it, Lee, you being here, and return to welcome to Costa, my old colleague. Lee, I was wondering when we had developmental services, the Department of Developmental Services before us, they mentioned that you were in charge of their group homes, the capital improvements on the homes that are in the private sector, if you will. Any capital improvements that they need go through you. Can you point me to that on your spreadsheet or what line item you go off of for that nonprofit capital improvement?
I am not sure about that. If someone here can help me with that, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, they had they had a huge number of homes that I questioned them on, and they said, well, that's under DAS, where they operate, of course, in all our there's a group home pretty much in a lot of our neighborhoods throughout the state. And they said that they go through you for any capital improvements that they may need. But
can I jump in? Maybe I can help, Lee. Are we talking about private group homes, or are we talking about state facilities?
Nope, these are private group homes.
I'm not aware of us handling any private group homes with any funding. I could tell you that I was part of the legislative committee by invitation, as you may recall, dealing with nursing homes and facilities, and talking about any infrastructure funding that we may provide based on particular needs. And I know that's still going through the legislative process, but as far as existing funding for something like that, it doesn't. State buildings, as you know, Joe, there are in fact, John, each agency is up to a certain amount of funds, and they'll submit requests, and if we'll go through that, but not for private.
Thank you, Costa. I'll get clarification from the department on that question also, but I appreciate it.
If you want to send it to me, I'll react to it. Sure.
Okay. And quickly, while I have you on school construction, you probably remember this when we served in the 90s that we used to cover all the municipal interest. Is that the principal and current payments verbiage on the school construction line? Are we still in that old program paying that down, if you will?
Thankfully not. We are no longer in that old program. In the new program, there is no interest payments from us at this point in time. What's actually bonded by the towns ordinarily, even though they may authorize the entire project, they're actually taking out in real hard cash those funds that usually represent their portion of the reimbursement rate. And therefore they're managing their own funds. And of course we pay our portions of it as it goes. But the old way pre-1995 is dead and gone. As a matter of fact, all those old bonds was a mission of mine to pay those off. Because you can imagine there were certain towns that had those old bonds and it would keep refinancing them, and something that should have ended 15 years ago was going on for another 30. So we've paid all the towns off on those bonds, and that process is done and gone.
Thank you very much. And good to see you.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Commissioner and Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Piscopo. Representative Mushinski.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hi, Costa.
Hello, Mary. How are you?
I'm A-okay. I wanted to ask you a couple questions. One on the idea of merging two high schools into one. Does DAS, have you done any projects like this previously? Does DAS encourage consolidation of high schools into one?
We certainly do encourage consolidation. Which is one of the whole reasons we ask the districts what they're doing and how they're putting their organizations together, their schools together if they need to. There was one community, for instance, had 3 elementary schools, 200 kids in each elementary school. It became expensive. They had in one of their schools 4 or 5 portable units. They wanted to combine them into one school of 600 and some odd children. Great idea. We assist in that. High schools, we do the same. One thing we're always cautious about is how big does a school get and how many is an appropriate number. For instance, do you really want to have 1,000 kids in the middle school? Not a good idea. Do you want to have 1,000 kids in elementary? Not a good idea. And then what's the cap, for instance, on a high school? You have a town like Danbury in their high school. I think you're bordering close to 3,500 kids. So the question is, do you do an addition or is it time for another school? So those are the kinds of things we deal with. Those are the conversations we have. We certainly encourage consolidation where it's appropriate.
Okay, but not where there would be too many kids in the final school.
Absolutely not. We know from learning, at least I try to learn and continue to follow with standards and guidelines that work for educators. We know that there's a minimum number of students where programs work best, and that's 400. So you try to stay at that 400 number to have at least the best running programs. And then you have that cap of, depending on each age group where that is, and you really don't want to exceed that.
Okay, what's your cap for the high schools?
Well, if we have the space and so on and so forth, I think Danbury has hit the limit. So based on the size of the population, they're at 3,000 and change. They had come in for another high school, or do they do an addition? And of course, we didn't approve it. We thought that they were capped where they should be in that 3,000 range based on the size of the school. And now they're looking to do a second one.
Okay, so your upper limit is probably 3,000 for high school level?
Yeah, it really depends on the town, the circumstances, and the number of kids, but it's about that. Yep.
Okay, and my second question is on funding for the YMCA's. In my area, the YMCA is the big backup social provider that backs up the school system. For example, when the kids were out of school for COVID, the YMCA picked up the slack. They had groups of kids come in for supervised training and otherwise helping the parents out by protecting the kids and giving them some structure to their day. And the school system heavily depends on them. And we've had trouble getting YMCA expansion or repairs or improvements through the bond commission uncharacteristically. So I'm wondering, what is the reason for holding back the YMCA's?
Well, let me see. I'll put a different hat on. One I'll put on as a former colleague of yours, and that was the support of the boys clubs and girls clubs, for instance, who do the same type of work as the Ys. And they are very instrumental in after-school programs and having computer programs and computer labs and assisting those kids with after-school programs, having someplace safe to go after school and being there, especially if parents are working or not at home at that particular time. So I, as being a former Boys Club Board of Director member, I support everything you've said. I think what we learned from our time, there was a time that we did in fact bond a few boys clubs in one particular year. And I think we did some Ys in that particular year. We found out later on that there were about 169 other ones that also wanted to get bonded, and it became somewhat cumbersome. Here's what I can say to you now. I can say to you and members of the committee now that the governor has an active interest in using some of the funds that are coming forward, in fact, to assist the WISE and the boys clubs, boys and girls clubs. Let me be clear, socially, it's boys and girls clubs, to work, in fact, with the school systems and looking to provide them some assistance because of the very thing you're speaking about, Mary. So I can't be definitive on what amount and what his thoughts are. I know he's still developing those thoughts, but I know he's supportive of what it is that you're talking about right now.
Okay, so when you say provide assistance, are you talking about as federal money comes to Connecticut, the governor would take a portion of that for the WISE?
I don't want to, I can say to you, and as the idea, the answer is yes, to in fact make capital improvements and or investments into those facilities that are being helpful.
Okay, is it dependent on federal funding or not?
I think it's a combination, Mary. It's a combination of federal funding and some state funding.
Okay. Well, that's useful information. And thank you very much, Costa. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Mushinski. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Lee, I'll ask my question to you since you might know best how to direct it. When we were looking through your proposal with the ADA improvements, can you share a little bit more about what those are for and how those improvements relate to other agencies? I ask this question because we've received a number of ADA improvement requests from other agencies, and I'm trying to understand DAS's role in coordinating or not coordinating with those agencies.
This one is Doug. So.
Thanks, Doug.
How are you doing, Representative?
Thanks.
Sure. This program was probably set up maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it was actually done by legislators, and it was money that was to be put in place to do ADA improvements to state buildings and other improvements that could improve the situation. So it didn't actually have to be 100% ADA or meet that definition to make things better. So we have spent money. We've let all of our agencies that do facilities know that this funding does exist and that it's available for their use to make small ADA improvements at their facilities. I will admit we haven't announced that money still exists, and clearly there's $4 million that are on the books. So it probably would make sense for us to send a letter out and just let them know that this funding is there and available for use.
Yeah, because I think one of the things, and that's very helpful, Doug, and maybe this gets at a little bit of you mentioning this further coordination you're trying to have. Are you imagining in the future that the 10-year plan and the requests that come forward might specify some of these ADA requests so you can better coordinate?
Sure. It's certainly possible with this new capital planning document that OPM and DAS Construction Services are putting together, that if there is ADA requests, that this funding source is an appropriate funding source for those requests. So I'm not necessarily aware of all my sister facility administrators at their agencies, all their different requests that are going in place, because I'm dealing with the DAS's portfolio of property. So I see it from a little narrow perspective, but I report to Noel, and Noel has the more global perspective of DAS Construction Services and looking at what all of the facility agencies are trying to get funded, capital funds to handle. So.
Right. So I'll jump in there. So basically what happens, the same as any other construction project, an agency will identify an ADA compliance issue, and they will talk to us. We will help them find an appropriate architect who's an expert, and we'll put a budget together and a schematic design together. They'll add that to their list of projects that they want to prioritize. It'll go onto the list, and then we'll review it. We'll prioritize it, send it over to OPM. They'll review it. That's the kind of project that is likely to be funded pretty quickly. It's a no-brainer. And so we assist them in developing the project scope. There is especially on ADA, there's a lack of understanding with a lot of people about what ADA compliance is. And so we help to explain to them what the actual code requires, and then what we can accommodate above and beyond that based on a particular person's needs. So there's a difference between, a building can be accessible, but you still need something a little extra for a particular employee or a visitor. And we assist in that as well.
And I will say we keep I think we have about $300,000 within our purview. So if we have a situation where we have to put automatic doors at a facility, we don't have to wait for a bond commission. So we have those funds in hand and we can make it available very quickly. So an agency can make immediate improvements to their building if something requires, if that's necessary.
Okay. Yeah, to your suggestion, Doug, it might be helpful sending a thoughtful reminder to agencies, and then we certainly might come back to you all to try to understand what you all might have the funds for based on some of these unallocated funds and what some of the requests are that have come our way. Thank you, John.
We would love to hear if you get requests that somehow don't make it through the system. That'd be very helpful. You can send it directly to Doug or to me.
Great. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Representative Farrar. But Representative Farrar, what you're asking is because all of these agencies had funding requests for ADA improvements, and DAS has $4 million in ADA improvements. Is there redundancy there? And
yeah, that's what I'm trying to determine. So I think them communicating first off that this money exists, and then us working through the list with everyone might be the best approach. But I'm open to other suggestions, Representative Bohr, based on what you would suggest for us moving forward to assure we have the best information of where those redundancies might be.
So just a little clarification. Generally, the funds that Doug is managing for ADA are for small projects. If we need a grab bar here or something small there, maybe a door, an opener, that type of thing, that can be done quickly. The reason he has those funds is so that we can respond quickly to an immediate need without going through the bonding process. If it's a larger project, like you need a ramp or an elevator or something like that, that would have to go for bonding. So just to clarify, this is really more of a small project, immediate need versus, a large capital project.
okay, so it's unexpected miscellaneous.
Kind of, yes. We do have a plan. Doug has a list of projects to do, but they're all smaller. They're smaller projects.
And they add up to 4 million? Or
Doug?
that's just the contingency?
No, they do not right now.
Okay, so it sounds.
So just so you know, some of these authorizations were done by the legislature. And my understanding is that one time they were considering putting in a second elevator in the state capitol building. So some of that money was put here for that purpose. When you look at the capitol building, I think on the west side, there's only one elevator. And once you get past the third floor, you can't cross over. So if that one elevator goes down and someone's on the fourth or the fourth floor, they can't, they don't have access. So that was where a lot of the funds for these authorizations came into play. They were put there with that intended purpose that ultimately was not used. So that's why there's a lot of funds sitting in that account.
As part of the 4 million you're saying was
correct.
Okay, so we're just asking because Office of Legislative Management came before us last week and talked about ADA improvements to the legislative office, the LOB and the Capitol. We just want to double check and make sure they're not double counting, the same thing you are.
These funds would be available for the LOB and the state capitol.
Right, but what I'm saying is they had in their request funding for improvements to the LOB, and they specifically said ADA. So we just want to make sure that they're not asking for an elevator and you're asking for an elevator and we can't save 2 million somewhere.
Understood.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, so Representative Claritas Dietrich, I'm going to let others that didn't go yet go for the first time, and then I'll come back to you. Senator Casano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question on school construction. For decades, we've been involved in a program of trying to desegregate city schools and provide a better, more quality education. We're getting a lot of feedback now that we have moved in that direction, and in trying to do the right thing, maybe we have done the wrong thing at the same time, and that we now have a large number of segregated schools and with themes. As an example, somebody mentioned earlier a chef school. If you're in a chef school and you're one of those schools, as an example, but somebody from a non-town that's eligible wants to go to that chef school, they can't. Public safety, if you're you live in a town that's outside of the quote district, you can't participate. And so we've gone from urban center schools, creating magnet schools that literally brought us back to the same problem we had years ago. How do we deal with that? Thank you.
Well, my quick answer would be it is more of an issue for the chef committee and the State Department of Education and the legislature to talk about some of the processes. But I could tell you that some of the problems that were created were by virtue of how the lottery was conducted. It was a blind lottery. You didn't know who was coming into the district. And sometimes as a result of the diversity that was required in the lottery, there were folks that were coming into the school district that prevented people that should have been there from being there because of it being technically blind as to who the person was coming. Now, my understanding is there's been a chef resolution that they're implementing at this point, but it is a question for SDE because it's a policy question, not a construction question. For me, it is about ensuring that I'm not duplicating seats. One of the bigger problems I had is if you were building a magnet school in one particular area, drawing from a particular town, and then the town is coming to you to build a school, it becomes critically important to ensure that our enrollment numbers are accurate, so I'm not overbuilding, underbuilding, or building two seats. Because as you probably know, at the minute you build a new school, everybody likes to go bright and shiny. So are the kids from the magnet going to go back to the home district? Are more kids, are they going to stay? So it becomes complicated from a construction perspective. So we're always interested in knowing how the enrollment numbers come about. But your other question is more policy driven for SDE.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Casano. Representative Masters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The prior question, Madam Chair, that I think you made or comment to Doug about the elevators. When we were talking about the rotunda and I was making the observation of us expelling the statue from the rotunda, they were commenting afterwards about the elevators, and there was an issue. I thought they'd mentioned 300,000 or 400,000 in renovating, but they said they thought they were on the sell-by date. So I just bring it up. I don't want to tie up the committee, but I'm not sure whether they're looking to renovate an elevator there that looks like there might be funds here of 4 million. And they were talking about it being at its expiry date in the Capitol building. So maybe we want to make sure they're talking with the other group that the funds are appropriately allocated. Doug, the conversation last week mentioned renovating versus replacing. I hope everyone's on the same page that there are funds if that elevator shaft and the mechanicals have to be replaced. So I just leave that to you to follow up with the group that oversees the rotunda. Okay. Thank you. That was.
Thank you, Representative, for that additional information. Representative Dietra, I don't know if you're still on. I know you had a hot walk. I think she had a hot walk.
Oh, there you are. I'm still here. Sorry, I'm walking through a gym right now. I don't know if anybody asked this question already, and I apologize, but if funding becomes available, what is in the pipeline? Who's next in the pipeline for the fire training schools?
Noel, can you take that?
Yep, sorry, I was on mute. The next is the Valley. The Valley is up on the schedule.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. And, but your question was, if funding becomes available, there is $24 million that was authorized. It just hasn't been allocated.
Yes.
Okay, so the funding is available through authorization. It just hasn't been allocated.
Yes.
So I just
Right,
wanted
and hopefully we can get the governor to fulfill his promise. So thank you.
Okay. And then Tom, can you just make me host for one quick second on the fire schools?
Tom had to step into another meeting.
Okay.
I believe you are a co-host already.
Okay. All right. So let me see. I don't know if I can do this. You can't see that, right? Oh, I'm looking for my, hang on, fire school. Can you see that fire school map? No. All right.
I just enabled share screen, so try it now maybe.
Okay. I just wanted to, you know what? I'm going to send it to you, and then maybe you could share screen it before we're done. Is my share screen off now? Yes. Okay. What it was a map, because there's been so much discussion over the fire training schools. I wanted to try to get my arms around where are the existing fire training schools, where are the proposed fire training schools, what adds up to that $24 million. So I had asked the Volunteer Association for a map of, you know, an overlay of where those fire schools are and where the proposed schools are so that we could see the gap. So I'll send that to the committee members. And I also asked that it be overlaid is that's the word, with the population of the state and what communities are volunteer firefighters, because there's, I don't know, 24,000 volunteer firefighters across the state. And I think, and I don't know if my numbers are perfect, but maybe 8,000 paid firefighters. So there is a big gap there. And I just wanted to me, a picture says 1,000 words. So I just wanted to show everybody where that gap was. So when we talk about priorities, we understand it's a geographical priority as well. So that was just on the fire schools. And then I want to go back to school construction. Says, I just want to make sure I understand there's 386,000 unallocated balance right now. The latest bonding school construction bill that just came through education, that doesn't add up to 386,000. So is the delta for future reimbursements of projects that are already underway? He's still with us.
You're on mute, Costa. You're on mute.
Sorry about that, folks. It is based on what we try to do now with our new system is project outwards what our needs are going to be based on the projects that are running and those projects that the legislature approves as we go, to include our technical schools. And one of the things that were never included in school construction per se was to be able to carve out the tech schools that were approved by the ledge and need to go forward, as well as the two CREC magnet schools. So it is our opinion that that 386 will carry us to a point, but we need that next 550 to keep us going with the progress payment based on reimbursements that'll be coming in for the town. What we don't want to happen is what happened some years ago where we didn't have enough money, not under my watch, we didn't have enough money, we didn't pay the towns, and then we got stuck paying the interest on all the towns that didn't get reimbursed. So we certainly don't want to go there.
Okay. Okay, so I understand that. So the $100 million difference in the request for 2022 and 2023 as compared to other years is so that we can address those schools that we haven't addressed before.
Correct.
Right? Okay. All right. And then, you know, I'm glad. So I had looked at the student population over the past, 5-10 years, and it looks like, if I'm calculating right, in the past 10 years, there's 50,000 less students in Connecticut. I don't know if that's accurate, but I'm glad to hear that we're not using the number of students to drive our decision on building new schools, because certainly there's an opportunity for smaller class sizes, right? If Danbury has 3,000, I can't believe they have 3,000 students in their high school. I come from an Alliance district. We have a significant amount of students on our classroom. So it's my hope that will continue. And I'm glad that this 550 million is still a driver for new schools, so that we could continue to reduce the class size. I don't want us to say the population is dropping, so we don't need to build the new schools. So I'm glad.
Yes, absolutely not. Where schools are built, and as you can imagine, I visit the sites. I'm responsible for signing off on the approval of the site, whether it's a new school, and a recommendation on whether it should be a renovation. We work with the districts well. In some cases, you absolutely need new schools, sometimes the school was built so cheaply that it's just when you go visit a school and you see the building, one side of a wall of a 2-story building leaning to the right, we got a problem.
Yeah.
And it's not something you can renovate easily. So,
right.
Yes.
And I know bricks and mortar don't make an education institution. However, there's something to be said about walking into a school that you could be proud of with state-of-the-art resources. There's
No doubt about it.
nothing like it. And then one last question on the Alliance grants. We had authorized 36 million previously, and I think another 36 million in 19 and 20, no, 20 and 21. But we've only spent 30 million, and those were to be grants to the Alliance districts for reimbursement for school improvements. I know that we released in September a series of grants to the Alliance districts, but there's still $36 million sitting there. Is there a plan to disperse that to the Alliance schools soon?
Yes, the governor obviously is very supportive of providing that funding to districts to assist in their other types of projects that they ordinarily couldn't have access to funds, right? So the Alliance will pay for something that already isn't in the well. For instance, it's not for renovations, it's not for alterations, it's not for roof projects, because we already have funding for that, and it's an automatic if they apply for those funds. So this is for all those other types of projects, updating of a heating and air conditioning system, for instance. So he's very supportive of that, and the answer is yes. I think what people are waiting to do at this point in time is see the funds that are coming down from the federal government with respect to the school districts to be able to do, in fact, heating and air conditioning systems and changing them, because some of them may be old. Please, please, please keep in mind, as the legislators from your town and the senators from your towns, and that is, it is one thing to say you're going to buy a heating and air conditioning system and a chiller and so on and so forth. But the introduction into the school then becomes problematic. To get through the ductwork, to run ductwork, you're going to open up ceilings, walls in some cases. That could trigger PCBs, asbestos, and what you thought you were buying, which was a heating and air conditioning system and some chillers, is you ended up buying a buttload of trouble, because now you've got a bigger project than what you thought. So what we're looking to see is if we can get an idea of what the towns are looking to do with the funds that they do get, if it's infrastructure oriented, coordinate with us, hopefully, coordinate with the Alliance district money if they need additional assistance, maybe use it to balance out a rental project or something they may need instead, and coordinating those funds together with us so we can get some good projects out there.
Great. Okay. Well, this has been very useful discussion for us. A lot of great information. Are you going to be back with OPM for the OPM meeting next week?
Yes.
Okay. So we reserve the right to ask more school construction questions.
Anytime you want.
Through your OPM hat.
Anytime you want.
Okay. All right, great. I don't see any other questions or any other comments. We appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate all that you do. We will see you next week. And thank your entire team for us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
The next group should be here.
Our Connecticut State Colleges and Universities. Who did you say Christine's here?
They're here. I see Ben Barnes.
Oh, okay. Oh, there he is. Hi, Ben. You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Hi, how are you, Representative Boer? It's nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. And who do you have with you here today?
I am joined by Sean Bradbury, our Director of Government Relations, and Keith Epstein, who is the Vice President of Facilities, and our interim president, who I think will do a better introduction of our team and what we're here for, interim president, Dr. Jane Gates. So I'll turn it over to Jane.
Great.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, Senators Moore, Representative Bora, Senator Wong, Representative Piscopo, and members of the General Bonding Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to review the capital budget for the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities, also known as CSCU. For the record, as Ben has said, I'm Dr. Jane Gates. And already joining us, did you introduce Keith Epstein, who should be on as well? Vice President for Facilities, Real Estate, and Infrastructure Planning joins us today. Keith has prepared a very detailed overview for you, which has been provided to the subcommittee previously. You have a busy day, so I'll spare you all the details, and we'll simply make a couple of quick points here. First, we greatly appreciate all the support from this subcommittee and your colleagues across the General Assembly for the capital projects you have funded and continue to fund for all of our 17 colleges and universities. Secondly, we appreciate the requested projects included in the governor's recommendation, but respectfully request that the subcommittee add 3 projects which did not make it into the governor's recommendation. The first, $2.5 million in FY22 and FY23 for the college security program. The second request, $7.5 million in FY22 and $7.65 million in FY23 for the university's auxiliary service program. And third, $3.57 million in FY22 and $8.6 million in FY23 for design and construction of a new boiler plant at Eastern Connecticut State University. These are all critical projects for CSCU, and Keith will be very happy to provide additional details or answer any questions for the subcommittee on these projects. Finally, I would like to conclude by stressing that we appreciate all of the support that the General Assembly and the governor have provided to us over the years. Our ability to serve and support our students, faculty, staff, and community is only possible thanks to the resources that you have provided us. And with that, we're happy to take your questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Jane. Looking to see thank you for your presentation. Just a clarification, you mentioned 2.5 million in 22 and 23 for security improvements, but I do see a governor's recommendation for $2.5 million in 22 and 23 for security improvements. So did you mean above and beyond that?
The report I had did not list security improvements for the colleges. We requested it, but the governor did not recommend it.
Yeah, we have a little difference of documentation here because, and I'm going to switch to OFA just for clarification. If somebody from OFA is on, I have $5 million in university school security in my documents.
Yeah, that's what I'd see as well, but I'll double check and real quick and get back to you.
Okay, so that was an easy ask for the university. See how fast we deliver? But we'll double check that, and certainly, we certainly need security on our college campuses. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you asked my question on security. My other one was under your new requests, you have 7.5 and 7.6 for auxiliary services. I don't see that as a request in your spreadsheet. Is that would that be brand new language this year, or is that on a form I'm just missing here?
That was in the spreadsheet. Every biennium, we request $5 million for each fiscal year towards auxiliary service. And this dates back to when the chief of programs started. The state had a verbal agreement that if we were to self-bond student use facilities, that they would provide, the state would provide some funding in continuation from what they used to provide. And we've been getting $5 million annually. At this point in time, we've asked for a little more. The governor didn't recommend it. In the last biennium, there wasn't a recommendation, and it's becoming extremely hard to fund many of the facility needs, student use facility needs, being improvements and renovations to dorms and parking garages and student centers, student use facilities. It's becoming extremely difficult to fund all those items on the students' fees.
Thank you. And I see you list all your colleges and your community colleges, and there's no governor recommendations in each fiscal year. Can I assume that it comes out of you can move a line item from up top, if you will?
Count on it.
No, I'm not. Yeah, something. I guess that's a hard question, but I see you have. Okay, I'll just give it to you as an example. You have 19,000 and 20,000. The governor's recommendation for community colleges for just a wide range of infrastructure improvement. You can apply that to each of the colleges below.
We do, yes. So it's distributed, it's prorated to each of the institutions based on their size and age of facility.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Piscopo. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Dr. Gates. So nice to see you and your team. Yes, wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Yes, a few questions, particularly around the advanced manufacturing plan, because I know this has been a long time coming and something many of us, are very focused on, particularly in this moment as we look about retraining and reskilling up so many of our unemployed folks into this high wage, high growth economy. Can you kind of give us a sense of, what is the time frame right now of those advanced manufacturing facilities on the campuses and any impediments that you see as barriers to using and implementing that funding or getting folks enrolled?
As far as funding for the facilities, I can't speak of enrollment, but I can speak of the facilities. So as soon as we receive the allocations, we do commit the funding. So we are planning projects on a continuous basis and using as much of the funding as we can. Right now, we are ready to enter into construction for a new facility in Farmington for Tungus Community College, a 20,000 square foot advanced manufacturing facility. Those were the construction funds were funds that were just released. We're planning right now for Middlesex Community College, another advanced manufacturing facility of about 12,000 square feet at one of the technical high schools, kind of a joint venture. We have design fees. With the release of new construction with new funds, we'll be able to afford construction on that facility. And we're also looking at partially funding, and we need additional new funds, manufacturing facility for Naugatuck Valley Community College. They have a program now where we're going to extend their program down to the Danbury area at Western Connecticut State University in one of their buildings. So we're trying to expand with new funds.
And can you give, I know myself being new to the subcommittee, can you give a little guidance on kind of the strategy behind having these facilities at each of the campuses that you highlighted? What was kind of strategically behind some of those decisions?
Jane, do you want me to review that the best I can? I mean, I'm not the academic side, but I can on the facilities.
You can review it, and what I will do is shore up or add additional details. You can begin from the physical.
Okay, so I think I get your question, but you know, these programs support, they're important. They support students, of course, retraining of employees and current companies who sign on an agreement with our colleges, as well as advancing the workforce. High school students have used our facilities for a program where they could have gain college credits at our campuses as part of a high school program. And we've also extended part of the program, advanced manufacturing, as a first of its kind to Derby High School, where we offer a program where students can take advanced manufacturing and earn, I think it's 12 college credits while still in high school. That's towards advanced manufacturing.
Yeah, I was just specifically interested, and maybe Dr. Gates, you can get at this, the campuses that were chosen and, you know, for this capital improvement, what was the strategy behind those campuses? I think that's what I was trying to understand.
The campuses, traditionally what happens is that the campuses move forward to the system level. So it's from bottom up. For example, as Nantucket, Norwalk has certainly, well, and the Naugatuck Valley programs, those are the ones that are established. Sometimes there are grants that are used to support those, but specifically the locations are responsive to the industry needs. In fact, they're partnerships and they differ from one location to another in advanced manufacturing. I can tell you with respect to admissions, given the pandemic, the challenge has been the spacing to ensure that X number of students, because those classes have been held in person on the campuses, unlike the others that have been offered remotely. So that has been a challenge, but with respect to the admissions process, it's gone very smoothly, and we have record high numbers in the manufacturing centers. But it's not that we or any of us at the system level chose the specific sites. Those were the institutions that wanted to offer manufacturing within their institutions. And what we do is provide the support for them. It's non-credit bearing, as opposed to the credit, and all are working out extremely well. They are, however, regionally working across the regions to ensure that if there are certain types of courses, then those are very similar or across all of those manufacturing institutions. They're working extremely well regionally and very responsive to community needs.
And I will just add to what President Gates said. And on top of our own facilities, we've been really good at leveraging opportunities with the VOTEC system and building off of the programs that they already have. So if you notice, Quinnebog's facility was originally housed at one of the VOTECs out there. You have Capital just announced a program with Prince Tech here in Hartford to expand their program and offerings to students. So we do try to leverage existing resources wherever available. And likewise, as President Gates indicated, to work within our system to make sure that as we build these out regionally, that we're not, duplicating efforts, that we're not having competing manufacturing centers, drawing from the same pool of students. So trying to plan them out more thoughtfully and more responsive to regional industry and partnership needs.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying the regional approach. It's very helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Representative Farrar. Representative Doucette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, actually, my questions are on the same subject. So drill down a little deeper on this. So the current funding that's requested for advanced manufacturing is for those three projects that you mentioned, Tungus, Middlesex, and Naugatuck, or are there others that will be beneficiaries of those funds?
There are others that will be developed. That's correct.
Okay, and you currently have six programs in the community colleges, and I see that it mentions 2 off-campus instructional centers. Is that Derby and one of the 2, and then what's the second?
West Con, I believe, would be the second one we're developing. There's also one at Wilcox Tech we're developing for Middlesex right now. I think one of those may be the second one.
Okay. Great. So in terms of, I know it's hard, and we touched on this a little bit, it's hard to tell in terms of enrollment. My sense over the years has been that there's a pretty high demand for these programs. Whether or not that always translates into the enrollment numbers, I think from industry standpoint, certainly we hear a lot about it at the legislature. But my sense is that that enrollment sort of levels are relatively high. So I guess if we may or may not want to throw out this past academic year or this current academic year, is that the case? Would you say that there's increase or there's unmet need or demand for these programs that we need to expand the ones that are already in existence to get more open up more seats for those programs?
Yes, based on the data I've read recently, and I had a great conversation with Jim Lambella from Nantucket, there certainly is opportunity to expand these programs. Even through, I would suggest through the pandemic, those programs have not been the ones that have had high attrition, primarily because we have offered them in person, even though the spacing issue there was a concern, but the security was in place as well. But I would certainly say, in light of the micro-credentialing and other needs that were identified by the governor's workforce within the last several weeks here, there is an opportunity to expand those programs in the state, to upskill for those persons who are looking for new opportunities and who lost jobs during the pandemic, and we're still in it, but as we're nearing the end of it, I would say there are opportunities.
That's my sense as well over the years, listening to you all and being out in the community. We've got one in Manchester, which is pretty small, relatively speaking, and I know there is great demand for that. And I've been in the facility physically a few times, and it's beautiful, but it's small. It's hard to picture that it's really meeting the demand. I'd be interested to see enrollment figures for those programs system-wide, or and if you can break them down by facility, and would also be interested to know if there are waiting lists for those programs typically. So if you have that data that you could send us after today, I would definitely be interested to see it.
I'm looking at it now, so we'll get that to you immediately.
Beautiful, even better. Great. So are you all coordinating with the new Governor's Workforce Council on this subject, or are there members from the CSU system, excuse me, on the Governor's Workforce Council?
Yes, I'm participating on the Governor's Workforce Council. And I know there are other representatives from our institutions too on different subcommittee groups as well.
Okay. And so is this request, or, just looking at these programs going forward, coordinated with that? Or is that work that you're anticipating sort of doing with the council over the coming year?
I would say indirectly yes, because we're focusing on ways to get people employed more expediently here in this, the upskilling, and that includes both credit and non-credit credentialings. And those, so we're not specifically focusing on now the diplomas, but we're looking at micro-credentials. And this is a really wonderful area for the CSCUs in general. I mean, we've had conversations about that. Charter Oak State College already provides micro-credentials, and they're provided clearly in the manufacturing programs. So I'm looking at this data. Now I'm going to get it to Sean, and Sean will get it to you with because the placement rates, 90% job placement rates from these manufacturing centers. Very impressive data. So we're doing a really great job.
And I will just add to your question, Representative, is that part of the governor's workforce bill has the future Office of Workforce Strategy recommending to our system, identifying credentials of high value that we can then, of what they're hearing in demand from workforce industry partners, that we can help to identify for expansion of either facility space or training needs that we can have to make sure that we're meeting those needs in the programs beyond just advanced manufacturing. That, obviously that's one that we want to make sure that we're right sizing and we're offering the appropriate number of seats, and that if we need to expand, that we can be making the request of the subcommittee and others for whether it may be facility space, equipment, or what that may be, hopefully years in advance and not, in the moment requests. So there's a bunch of pieces. I don't want to make too many more shameless plugs for that bill, but there's a lot of good in there of coordination between our system and the Office of Workforce Strategy that we're really excited about.
Good. Yeah, look forward to hearing more about that. And you're right. This is one that gets a lot of attention, I think, at the legislature, but there are a lot of other great opportunities there. Healthcare, I know, is one that we also have at Manchester that's been very successful. You mentioned, or someone mentioned, the collaboration with high schools, which is also one that I'm particularly interested in and have been working on. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about that. And then specifically, I had a question about funding for those programs. I believe there was a program, I think it was called College Connections previously, where there was a bond authorization maybe from 4 years ago. I'm sure Mr. Barnes probably may be able to tell us a little bit more about that. And that one was, as I understood it, was specifically used to fund the Derby program and perhaps some others. Could you speak a little bit more to that? And then I guess the question is there potentially more funding for similar programs of that type moving forward, either within existing authorizations or something that we should consider adding?
I believe the College Connections program was funded with federal Perkins funds.
Correct. That is correct.
The new acronyms, I'm trying to get the hang of all these different program names. So that was funded with federal funds, and I believe it's an ongoing program. I do believe that we're going through a whole process right now of trying to evaluate what to do with the, we know some of it, but there are some stimulus funds that we received from the federal government that we would like to use to address a variety of concerns that our students have coming back from the pandemic, but the lack of those who lost their jobs and want to use this opportunity to go back and get a better job with workforce training. That's one of the areas we're definitely looking to use our existing federal funds. We're also working with the Office of Workforce Strategies they apparently may have some federal funding available for workforce development directed through the states. So I expect that there will be expansions coming out of that process, which is ongoing right now within CSCU. So there may be some, individual colleges that have programs that they want to expand or add more capacity to over the next couple of years. And we may even do some system-wide initiatives in that regard, but we're still trying to piece together how we would use our existing federal funds for that. in terms of operating funds, I mean, we could certainly support these programs, and the campuses that participate in the College Connections make considerable in-kind contribution. They provide staff support to the programs and faculty to teach the courses, and we provide a whole lot of free tuition to high school students who participate in the program. We use federal funds and our own resources to provide all that activity. So we are supportive of those programs, and I'm hopeful that we can use some of the new, federal money over the next 2 years to expand those to meet the current demands coming out of the pandemic.
Okay.
And to add additional information to what Dan has said, the CCP programs, College Career Pathways programs, are Perkins, that's right, supported programs, and there are programs also that are referred to as College Connections. So those are two separate programs, but in fact do very similar things. A recent example of the success of what we would refer to as dual enrollment or participation in the high school has been as Nantucket Community College, which has students bused to their campuses for manufacturing. That's an example, high school students. The challenge, however, comes with in our partnerships in terms of growing it and expanding it, comes with our availability of high school teachers who must meet our minimum qualifications for instructions per the institutional accreditors requirement. So that has sometimes served, it's a barrier in fact, but we have to make sure that occurs. So the high schools can only offer so many articulated courses. And we need to sort of find our way, work through that challenge. But that was made very clear a few years ago by the New England Commission for Higher Education, because the students are being awarded community college or university credit.
Right. Yeah, I'm familiar. I've heard about that issue over the years too. And I believe there was a bill this year, but it was actually on the other side. It was on the secondary education side in terms of accreditation. So it could work both ways. And yeah, I've worked on this in Manchester for a while myself, and trying to help. There's already a great relationship between the college and the high school in Manchester. There's already a program and some sharing of ideas and resources going on there, but looking to the nuts and bolts to try to connect them, because I mean these are tremendous programs for our high school students, and obviously as a pathway to our community college system, and want to see more of it and want to see it expanded. So, but somewhat of a frustration, I guess, in looking, because it also falls into the workforce bucket as well. So in getting everyone sort of rowing in the same direction, as it were, everyone agrees this is a worthy goal, but the question is, who's taking the lead? Where's the funding coming from? And so there's still a lot to work out. And now, with the new workforce council coming in, it's gonna change the way things have done in the past, which is, I'm optimistic, but would like to see us, really, continue the progress that's been made and look to expand these programs wherever possible. So yeah, I look forward to that information, and appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Is the manufacturing caucus active?
Yes, but I think with everything going on right now, I know there was a meeting at sort of the beginning of the session, and my experience from last time too, same thing, sort of the beginning of the session, and then we get running in a lot of different directions in our committee. So,
yeah,
but no, I know.
City, right, to bring sometimes the agencies, right, sometimes the legislators through your caucus kind of brings it all together and connects the dots.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Representative Mashinsky.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you for reminding us about the caucus. That is a very good practical suggestion. We have to get the caucus together more often and not just get the interaction with the department DECD on the first day of the year, but also keep working with them. This is my usual manufacturing question about on the plan for expansion for advanced manufacturing training. Is the South Central Connecticut area going to rely more heavily on Wilcox as our way of training additional skilled workers to meet manufacturing needs rather than Gateway? Is Wilcox the plan for our region?
Gates, I can't answer that. You're on mute.
I don't have that specific information for that region, that's Wilcox is the site, but certainly we'll be very happy to contact in the COT and get that information for you.
Okay, because we have a large collection of manufacturing firms in South Central Connecticut that really are crying out for workers. So we're trying to get some center of training them in this area, Greater New Haven area. I did find out at a previous hearing that one of the issues was there was a limited amount of machinery for the computer assisted manufacturing, and that in order to deal with the shortage, we were doing double shifts, having people trained at night. And that one of the other barriers was teachers, which just came up a few minutes ago, and getting them certified. And I had asked the question at that time about bringing in borrowed manufacturers to serve as teachers. If they, I guess the problem is, can they be certified to be a part-time teacher for the system? But my interest is that we still have a number of manufacturers who are still constantly talking about not enough skilled workforce in our area, and we also have people that are working at low wage jobs, and I'd like to fix one problem by fixing the other problem. Marry these young workers to the better jobs.
So, Representative, we have sort of dealt with this issue of qualifications, specifically in the manufacturing programs. I think it was maybe 3-4 years ago where we were able to change through our HR how the qualifications to teach certain skills for credit there. This is on the non-credit side. So it is illogical to expect someone who'd been, for example, in steel or metal industry for 20 years to have a master's degree. So what we said was that, I mean, it's just illogical. We said was if one then could show work experience, X number of work experience, and there were certain qualifications there that showed that one had the job skill competencies, then in fact that would make one eligible to be brought in, but it was a new classification level that we were able to approve. So we are attempting to resolve those issues as well. But of course, the high school teacher is a different matter. That's one we're still trying to work our way through.
Okay. It doesn't matter to me which level we do it at, as long as we are producing a larger number of skilled students to fill these advanced manufacturing jobs, because this is like a constant complaint from the manufacturers in my area that they don't have enough people that are at the right skill level. So I'm just bringing it up because they bring it up to me, and we have so many manufacturers in our area. So in a nutshell, Wilcox would be the center of training for my area rather than Gateway. Is that correct? For manufacturing?
In the Middletown area, that's correct.
Yeah, this is Ben, Representative Mashinsky.
Hey Ben, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you.
It's nice to see you as well. I suspect that I know that Housatonic also has some manufacturing programs, which are, sort of on the other part of the side of the New Haven area. Gateway is a particularly challenging environment because of the difficulty in finding real estate for one thing or another. I know I'll take the opportunity, since you've asked about Gateway, to point out that one of the items we asked for in our capital request was funding to replace the North Haven Automotive Center. The North Haven campus of Gateway, which is now mostly occupied by ACES, who operates a magnet school there, still houses a relatively old and undersized and decrepit vehicle maintenance training facility that Gateway uses for its automotive programs. There's a lot of interest in the industry to begin, the electric car manufacturers and, the sort of the new technology in cars to provide training for technicians who can fix the lane guidance system in your new car or whatever it is. And so we're still struggling to find a location. We went through a process to try to find a private partner to develop the former Gateway location on Long Wharf in New Haven to include automotive center, but the pandemic and other things, we're gonna have to restart that process. We were unable to find the right partner in that first time through. But there are some, I think that there are some real opportunities in the New Haven area to provide more sort of vocational education as part of the program. The automotive has been a priority of the leadership at the campus over the last few years, because apparently the North Haven campus is difficult to get to for their students, and doesn't have the technology that they want to have for a more modern program. But it's certainly worth thinking about that in the context of additional manufacturing capacity as well. Maybe we can consider trying to do both of those, especially as we, now that the pandemic, maybe the end is in sight, we'll think about rerunning our process for finding a way to use that Gateway site on Long Wharf to maybe provide some of these programming opportunities in the New Haven area.
Okay, thank you. And I assume if we go to a new physical location, we'd have to put in the advanced manufacturing machinery for the kids to practice on. So we'd have to invest in advanced manufacturing for those new sites.
Yes, and we actually are now up against having to replace and upgrade some of the equipment that we have in our existing programs as well. And some of the oldest manufacturing centers that we have are, and Keith can tell me, but they have to be 8 or 10 years old. And so we're now also having to dedicate some of our resources to, we haven't yet, but we've had requests for the need to replace some of the older equipment and to bring in new generation of manufacturing equipment in order to make sure that our facilities are able to, provide fully up-to-date instruction and methods.
Okay, and we could probably get the manufacturers to kick in on that too. I think they would. I think it would be worth it for them to give us some equipment in exchange for a better quality of workforce.
Yes, and we also do a lot of I sort of think of it as private label training, where a company will ask us to provide, using our facilities, will provide specific training for cohorts of their employees, like a batch of new employees or employees who are seeking some kind of professional upgrade. And we provide that.
I think Frontier is the provider here.
So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Timothy. Senator Pisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a very good afternoon so far. Mr. Bonds, Mr. Bradbury, it's good to see you both again. I'm sitting here thinking it really wasn't the 70s, Ben, that we started at CCM, was it? It could well be.
That was the 90s, Senator Casano.
Okay. A couple of things. Manchester obviously is one of the larger community colleges. It's in the process, I think, of expanding its manufacturing program. Clearly, it's not a priority, and yet for the manufacturers here, they say it's not enough opportunity, not enough openings. Manchester's an interesting town. The community college here is surrounded by East Hartford, South Windsor, Manchester, all of them mostly very, very manufacturing directed towns. In World War II, this is where the small shops were located. They're still located. People have no idea who live here. The little shops in the back streets and so on that make a widget for this or a widget for that. And all of it goes to basically three manufacturers, Electric Boat, Pratt & Whitney, and Sikorsky. I have manufacturers in Glastonbury that one in my mind that I could see right now is he makes a single part for Sikorsky 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on overtime. Many do the same thing for the other manufacturers. And yet we're not expanding the program in Manchester because we're, quote, we exist. I applaud your effort to expand the program statewide. It's got to be done, but it's got to be done everywhere because these are jobs that become permanent. These aren't jobs that people take for a couple of years and leave. They are the base of this economy. And so I really, as one that loves the community college system, without it, I don't know where my life would have gone, but it provides an incredible opportunity, and we need to expand it even more than we're talking about. That brings me to a second question or a second comment. Workforce, we're trying to create jobs, there's no question about it. But to get qualified applicants, it's extremely difficult. We have a program at Manchester. It's probably the only program I know of in the community college system that can say, without lying, that we have graduates working in every country in the world. And that's our culinary arts program. The culinary arts program is, in fact, internationally famous at Manchester, and it needs to be expanded. And those jobs, clearly, when they graduate, they get a job. They get a job beforehand. In fact, we used to kid, as faculty members, we would look at a list of postings for job openings, and there'd be 5 or 6 in this and 8 or 10 of that. And then you look at the culinary openings, 30 or 40 pages of culinary open across the country, trying to get Manchester Community College students. It has to be expanded. And I don't know if that's in the program, but I'd like to know. And finally, I have to ask for your help and help throughout the state on my pet peeve. I see graduation rates every year, and I see the community colleges knocked about because of their graduation rate. I was fortunate, I did get my degree there, but I can tell you for every person like me, there were 10 or 15 that got their job there. And they went on and they transferred to UConn, or they transferred to University of Hartford, or they transferred to colleges all across the country. But because they had the ability to transfer, they didn't come back or transfer their credits back to graduate. Somebody's got to look at this process because it's a slap at the face of one of the base systems of this education program in Connecticut. It's just unfair to see numbers like that thrown about without seeing the success rate of the students who come out and the jobs that they go into. So I would ask you, and if we can do anything on the legislative end, let us know, because that is just a disservice to every one of those students who goes on, comes to that college, sometimes floundering, sometimes scared stiff. Can I do this? Can I do this? And they do it. And there's a slap in the face. So follow up on this sometime. Anything I can do to help, but we need to change that system. Thank you.
Senator, we have already moved to change that. We don't tell our stories as well as we should, but on our website is the board there, dashboard that's called SAM, Student Achievement Measure. If one goes to the WCSCSCU website, you will see that includes students who have transferred from the community colleges to other institutions in the state, but did not complete their degrees. We unfortunately must refer to the completion data because it's required by IPEDS, the federal government. So we have the IPEDS data in one category, and then on the other category, we're showing those students who did successfully transfer to other institutions. So that does in fact change the outcome data. It shows it, but it isn't counted, however, in the federal government data because the federal government only counts first-time, full-time students. And that, of course, is what we tend to look at when we're funded and also report it. And now if we can get the federal government to change those guidelines, that would be very much appreciated. But I wanted you to know that we are very much appreciative and we do understand that there is value in our community colleges beyond the completion of a degree or a credential. We're also including certificates. We look at SAMs, we're including certificates now. We expanded it to include certificates as well as degrees or transfers. The other thing that's out there but has not been utilized has been what we call reverse transfer. For those students who do transfer to the universities, all they have to do is apply to the community colleges and submit the credit hours they've received in the universities. It's transferred back to the community college and they're able to get that associate degree. It's in place, but it simply is not being utilized by students who transfer out. So we are being rather innovative and responsive in trying to ensure that we get those outcomes and completion rates up.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
And just to build off that too. So first of all, thank you, Senator, for the warm welcome. It's good to be back in Connecticut and good to see you again. Building off of what President Gates has said, and she's being humble too. Her crew has done a lot of work on some initiatives that we're rolling out in the colleges to not only showcase the achievements under SAM, but also to help boost that completion rate that we do see reported under IPEDS. One of those you may have heard about is Guided Pathways, which is a suite of policy and practices based on national best practices and research to help support student completion. One of the biggest instances of that is we're trying to reduce the advisor to student ratio across the system. You know as well as many of your colleagues, like we have a pretty high ratio of students to advisors. Within our system, I think it's average of 1 to 850 last time I checked. Part of Guided Pathways, probably the linchpin of that initiative is hiring hundreds of new advisors across the system. I think Ben can probably speak to the that proposal that we have around there, but that's something we can absolutely use the legislature support on. I think we're looking to utilize some federal funds for that, but ongoing support will always be welcome. The other piece that we'll be rolling out to legislators shortly is rolling out some national best practices around developmental education to help our students retain and persist, utilizing what PA 1240 had originally envisioned, which is the co-requisite model rather than prerequisite. So you'll hear that as ACME sometimes. That's one we're getting ready to brief legislators on more fully as that policy is formed and finalized and rolled out to make sure that we're keeping you abreast of everything that we're doing to help students retain and complete at our colleges, because we do great work. We are proud, especially those SAM rates. It does show, to your point, Senator, we have a lot of our students that, while they may not complete with us, they are moving on to other institutions to complete. And you have students who attend our institutions who aren't there just to get a degree, who are there for life enrichment, who are there for other programmatic needs. And I will say, I think Norwalk may have some fighting words with you over the culinary program at Manchester. I think they that is one piece that they are definitely proud of down there. And I don't know if they got somebody in every country like Manchester, but they might be coming for you on there. They do provide some good food at their legislative breakfasts, I will say.
Just to add to culinary, we do have culinary listed in our plan for renovations and additions. It just has not come up as an authorization to date.
And then one more piece of information, how I forgot this, I don't know. But one of the things that drives the focus on the graduation rates for our colleges and universities is the institutional accreditor. It was their letter that begun the heightened focus. So the New England Commission of Higher Education has on a specifically standard 8, which looks at institutional effectiveness. It does nothing but it looks in that data. It's a very comprehensive standard, and it is in fact data driven. We look at that and those outcomes, and that's what we've shifted from access to outcomes. So that's the other thing there that I think contributes to the presentation of the data that you see frequently cited.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Metzger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for the presentation. It's been very informative and helpful. I guess I sit here and I'm trying to understand the focus between both the community colleges and access to higher ed and outcomes versus vocational. And it's not with any bias or inherent bias. I just worry, given the employment opportunity and the gap, whether ultimately feeding people through the university system provides them with the same career opportunities as the vocational. And there's not an either or, but the question of both the resources that we're dedicating to both. Because I think vocational tech, we're obviously not doing enough, or it sounds like it. And within that scope, given the pandemic and the remote learning and hybrid learning between daytime and evening courses, how much do we need more in physical plant? What's the demand look like in physical plant for the VTech versus providing more courses or more scheduling opportunities? I'm not looking to be cheap about it. I'm just trying to figure out what's the most effective expansion to reach the group of, and do we have any way of measuring how many people we're not meeting on that vocational tech? Like, are we failing? Is there 20% of the population that can't get there for whatever reason, or 30%? Or is it smaller than that? Like, do we have I know that's not an easy measure, but I'd just love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
I don't have the data. I sit, excuse me, as ex officio of the State Department of Ed board, where in fact the purview for the VOTEC programs fall under the auspices of the State Department of Education. Ours under CSCU, we have the community colleges and the universities. So I really can't speak to the VOTEC and their.
I'm going to have to follow up with you afterwards. I'm stuck in the middle of a Zoom just now.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Representative Metzger, were you talking to us or were you talking to?
I literally had someone who was trying to call me. I had to hang up on it, so go right ahead. Sorry, I apologize.
So President Gates, he wasn't talking to us.
No.
Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Basically the VOTEC falls under, and I know Don knows guys very well there. I sit as ex officio on the State Department of Ed's board. So that's that system. So I really can't provide any specific data on the VOTEC programs, other than I understand they're doing extremely well. And that's just my sitting as an ex officio person. But we can only speak to, at this point, I think the sort of partnerships between the community colleges and the universities. Okay. And specifically one of the major, I think, vehicles that leads to expansion of these programs from community colleges through the universities and UConn and the University of New Haven and others is the College of Technology, which is the umbrella, as you're familiar with.
Right.
So that really, there's been a tremendous support there and a lot of federal grants that have been received as a result of that. And the focus is engineering, technology, and science, and manufacturing as well. So that has expanded, and we continue to invite campuses to present new programs or an interest to the COT before it comes to the Board of Regents for review by the academic and student affairs programs.
And Representative Meskers, I may sound like a broken record on this, but I'd like to also shamelessly plug the governor's workforce bill on this again, SB 881.
Right.
There's a lot of, between the credential registry and a lot of their data initiatives that are in there, and the partnerships and linkages that is building across both state sectors and public and private partnerships, that we're really hoping that some of that data that you were asking about of are we meeting employer demand for these programs? Are there areas that are underserved? Where are potentials for expansion? Identifying the high value credentials that can meet employer needs. There's a lot of that data. Some of it we are capturing now, but there's a lot of it that I think we have the potential to capture more as we build out the Office of Workforce Strategy and those linkages that you can see in 881. I know we're very jazzed about the credential registry and all the consumer-friendly data that will put out for students and industry partners and our community partners as we build these credential programs across our campuses to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our employers. But yeah, so I think more to come on that, but I will continue to make that shameless plug for SB 881.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, my concern is just that I look at everything with technological training as being the gateway for successful employment and meaningful employment versus, the service industry, which, well, I'm not demeaning it, but minimum wage jobs is not where we want to get our educational workforce. We want to provide them a pathway into the middle class and make sure we're filling both the educational slots and the training that give them that step into the future. So I appreciate all you do.
Thank you, Representative Meskers. I don't see any other hands for questions or comments, so I just want to ask a couple of follow-ups, if I may. So I'm just going to turn back to our capital lead sheet. So for the 22 million request and recommendation by the governor in 22 and the 22 million requested and governor recommended in 23 is for the new replacement of instruction, research, and laboratory equipment. Can we get a breakdown of what compromises that 22 million?
So those funds are usually provided as needed, as requests come up from the institutions, anywhere from computers to technology. We could provide a list of what our typical purchases are. What it will do is we'll just curtail some of the expenditures and minimize some of the improvements.
Okay, but you came up with 22 million somehow, right? So
it's our historic track record of what we traditionally spend based on benchmarking of what we've purchased in the past and what our expenditures have been in the past.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, which is there's $12 million in unallocated balance for the college and universities instruction, research, and laboratory, and there's 35 million in unallocated balance for the community colleges. Do you have any insight as to why those funds haven't been allocated yet?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I was waiting for you to chime in, Ben, on that.
We have requested that they be allocated.
Yeah, it's we try in the hearings not to give comment, but just to ask questions. But it's extremely frustrating when we ask these questions that there's so many millions in new requests, yet there's so much that we as a legislative body have authorized and are just not getting out there. So that's my one editorial today. I guess we're allowed one a day, but I could say that one every day. I want to turn to the IT infrastructure, and I know a lot of IT requests go through OPM, but I see that you have 15 million and 9 million for system telecommunications infrastructure and upgrades. And I'm wondering, you hear a lot lately about mental health on college campuses and modern tools and technology to reach students proactively, whether it's through a texting program or, telehealth, or, just meeting them where they're at, which is on their phone and on their computer. And I'm just wondering if there's been any thought, and if any of those bonding requests include or entail, or there's been given any thought to mental health telecommunications programs. Mental health.
Dr. Gates, could you answer that question?
I think frequently I have moved forward the recommendation that we look at and adopt, expand the mental health programs. It's become even more critical as a result of the pandemic, which has just sort of uncovered lots of deficiencies in higher education, more important and critical now than ever. We also have surveys. We've looked at data, the percent of students who've become very depressed as a result of not being able to engage and interact. It's been and being isolated. So yes, we have identified the need to provide some type of telehealth and mental health programs. We've also discussed how we might be able to ensure a physical presence, but of course we have to be very careful in what type of professional we're able to provide on our campuses. I understand we've also talked to legal affairs about this, so it is clearly one of the action items that we want to see in place immediately. And I've asked for CFO Ben Barnes. I send many requests his way. This is what I want us to do next. So, and then he looks at the dollars. So, and we're hoping that maybe perhaps some of the federal, I'm not sure, dollars can assist, not totally, but we are looking for ways to make sure we shore up that type of support for our students. And we forget our faculty and staff. So this entire situation has impacted many of us in higher education as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as a follow-up, a specific funding source would not come from our IT. That would actually come from our new and replacement equipment program. So that's part of the importance of receiving those funds to really fulfill many of the student, faculty, and academic needs.
And we're the intermediary between the providers and our students. Like, we have MOUs in place at most of our institutions with whether they are community health providers or they're like larger networks that we can refer our students to. We're not usually, most of our campuses do not have robust health centers, whether they be physical or mental health centers for our students, but we do try as best as we can to facilitate our students' interactions between identifying the need with our students and even with our staff with employee support programs, with providers that are located in the community, some of that through telehealth, some of that through in-person visit. I think increasingly with COVID, that's more probably shifted towards telehealth than it has been for physical visits. But there is I'll do another plug for, there is another bill out of higher ed dealing with the recommendations of the, the mental health task, or there is a task force on mental health issues within higher education that came up with a set of recommendations from both public and private sectors of how to deal with it. Some of it includes closer partnerships with DEMIS. Involves some mental health coordinating councils on campus to make sure that we're identifying ways that we can better serve our students, that we're adopting best practices. So this is an issue that is very much front in mind within higher ed, not just in our system. I think I can speak really for UConn and CCIC institutions that we're very concerned with making sure that we're supporting our students, but to Dr. Gates's point, our faculty and staff as we transition back to in-person and help them recover and deal with in some cases the trauma that they processed over the last year or so. I think we all agree that I think we could all use some help from dealing with this last year. So it's definitely we're concerned with.
I really appreciate that. And it's actually the mental health working group that I was, thinking about, because last year I had met with them and we talked about the opportunity. And this was before COVID, how to improve mental health services and Of course, there's nothing like an in-person service, but we know, the youth think differently, right? That's why I said meet them where they're at. And one of the things I just wanted to make sure from a bonding perspective, bringing it back to dollars and cents, that there was nothing we leave on the table with respect to supporting that from a funding perspective. And even one of the things that was discussed was really educating the students about the services available, right? So sometimes when they come on orientation, they're scared, they're nervous, they're excited. That's not the only time we let them know that mental health services are available. So, a text program, blast text, hey, don't forget we're here, something that goes on their computer. And they had talked about that in the working group. So if there's funding that's needed for programs like that, then certainly bring them to our attention. Not sure we can fund them, but we will try. And then one last question on going back to the agency lead sheet. So going back to the unallocated balances, we do have a number of programs that have been sitting out there more than a few years. So Norwalk Community College, that's 28 million. The Norwalk Community College alterations and renovations, that's 18 million. The Naugatuck College alterations is 5 million. Those have been sitting out there for 4 or 5 years. So, I know we just talked about allocating what we authorized, but are there active discussions to determine, are those funds still needed? I'm guessing they are, because needs don't go away. Will they ever be allocated? Because if not, should we reallocate what we authorized? So I guess I'll go back to Ben on that one.
Well, first of all, I am never going to recommend that you deauthorize funds that you've authorized for projects. I mean, there might be an occasion where a project is really no longer necessary or been subsumed in another project. But these are all projects. The Norwalk Community College projects are good projects. We ended up going out to bid for, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, we went out to bid for a big piece of the Norwalk project and the bid expired. We had it extended several times, but we couldn't get action through the bond commission in order to be able to go into the contract to perform that work. It's all designed and ready to go. So we continue to believe that those are worthwhile projects, but we have not yet successfully made that case to the bond commission. So we hope that they will continue to take a look at those, and we'll see the correctness of our views on those projects. But we have not been able to get them to support those going forward. There are a couple that are really, some of the projects at like the Kinney Hall renovations at Naugatuck Valley Community College is an example. We've asked for some funding in the second year of the biennium for that, but we would like to move on the first, that was sort of the second phase of it, if I'm correct, Keith. We would like to move, we have a pending request before the bond commission there. We believe that building, we have a temporary roof on the building. It's now a 5-year-old temporary roof. So, that's a concern for us, that we could have system failures in a few places as a result of project delays. But we're continuing to, provide whatever information is requested and renewing our requests periodically. I would say monthly, but the bond commissions have not been meeting monthly. So we're awaiting action.
Okay, understood. And I wasn't suggesting that they weren't needed or important projects. It's just, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of unallocated, not this agency, across the board, which is counting towards our bonding cap. And, we have to make some decisions on what projects are going forward and whether they are or not. So I don't see any other questions or comments. I just want to thank you all. As a proud alumni of a state university and a son who's at a state university, he's going to be really happy to hear that you're investing in the cafeteria. Not that there's anything wrong with the food, but you know, students, you can never make them happy. They don't even like the food at home. But I'm going to be able to share that with him. And that'll be the one thing he's interested in hearing me say today. But thank you, Ben. Thank you, President Gates. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Sean. Thank you to the entire team for all of your work across the state for our state universities and our state colleges. We're very proud of our institutions of higher education, and really it's your team that really drives a lot of those outcomes. So we just want to thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Representative Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And committee.
And committee, yes. And committee. Okay, thanks. And then Tom?
Yep, I think that's it. Yep, our next, can you hear me?
Yeah, do you want to announce our next meeting?
Yeah, so
have at our next meeting?
Yeah, next meeting is this Friday. I'll send the link after this meeting. I just didn't want to confuse anyone, so I'll send the link today. It's on Friday, April 9th at 3 o'clock. And then Wednesday, April 14th at 1:30 for our last meeting.
Okay, and then any documents that you get, if you can, you know, you don't, you could either send them to Senator Moore and I, we could send them out, or you could just go ahead and send them out to all the committee members. And I have a couple of documents that I'll send to you to send out to all the committee members as well.
Great, will do.
Okay, great. Anything else, Senator Moore?
No, all set. Thank you.
Okay.